Someone asks if he is recording and he says yes, and right after that, the guy greets his subscribers. This guy is Dakyo, a YouTuber who is recording a raid. The guy says that the monster they will face today is a rank C+. He adds that arachnids live in groups like ants. Moreover, they do not attack directly, but instead prepare webs. All the spiders start moving towards them. They begin to emit a terrifying aura. Dokuro asks what is happening and asks the boy to cut that part out. This is narrator Suu, our protagonist responsible for filming and editing. Arachnids do not usually attack directly. They behave as if they are hunting by casting webs and injecting venom so that the prey dies slowly. That is why everyone is impressed, because that is not how they usually act. Dokyo calls the protagonist a bastard, and later the two will have a conversation. The guy continues to attack the spiders. He goes on defeating one after another, perfectly straight and precise cuts. Several other monsters try to attack him, but Dakyo manages to act faster and counterattacks. He stands over all the creatures. His eyes are red with anger because the spiders should not be behaving this way, and the protagonist who previously came to investigate said everything was fine. He soon calls the protagonist's attention and asks what that was. The boy apologizes. Punching Sue in the stomach, Dokyo says he almost died because of him, then asks him to conduct the investigation properly. As he leaves, the guy calls the protagonist useless. We see that Sue is awakened, but he awakened with a skill called Traceless, meaning he became a useless awakened. His method of survival is analyzing monsters. He points out weaknesses and abilities, and he teaches hunters how to attack them. Hyokyo calls the boy a bastard and says that if it were not for him, everyone would be dead. Scared, the guys ask Dakyo to look behind him. Suddenly, a monster appears next to him. Everyone runs because that is an elite monster. Our boy joins everyone in running away. Dakyo asks if he is really going to die there. To survive, he says he will need bait and then looks at Suu. Without any pity, he kicks him. The guy says all this happened because Sue did not investigate properly, so you must take responsibility. On the ground, the protagonist curses Dakyo, but unfortunately, it is too late for the boy. Monsters are already behind him. Sue tries to do something, but his body is panicking. Our boy wonders if he will die like this. Elsewhere, the protagonist is talking to his mother in the hospital. She asks Sue to protect Siwa. Sue says he cannot die there because he still has his brother to take care of. Without fear, the boy grabs the sword. He points the blade at the monster, saying he needs to survive, no matter the cost. Someone launches an attack and the protagonist asks what is happening. We observe a person with blonde hair. Sue asks who that guy is. An explosion happens. The two immediately look. Suddenly, another person arrives and the protagonist does not understand what is happening. Out of nowhere, the guy jumps, and then shouts, telling the blonde that he keeps running away, and our boy asks if the two are fighting. Then he prepares an attack. The other responds in kind with devastating blows. The two are about to collide. An explosion occurs. Sue questions the situation and adds that those two make the arachnids and elite monsters tremble with fear. Flashes of light from the combat occur. Both are moving at incredible speed. Our boy asks who they are, attacking quickly from above. The guy kicks the other, thus creating a large crack in the ground. With a great aura, the guy asks where the blonde wants to go because he is tired of him rebelling. He says this is far from over, then prepares a firepower. The white-haired guy creates a black sphere. Then they launch their powers at each other. Again the attacks collide. He says if this continues, not even the blonde will come out unscathed. The guy says it does not matter, because he left the possibility open. He apologizes for involving Sue in this. The other tries to say something, but a massive explosion occurs. The entire place is being devastated. Even so, the guy smiles. Debris is being thrown everywhere destructively. The boy observes the situation. Suddenly hears a voice saying they will leave it to him. An energy protects the protagonist. Smoke spreads. Amid the darkness, Sue was alone, asking what the hell is happening. Taking a step back, he ends up stepping on his cell phone. He picks it up but does not understand why it is there. A message arrives. The cell phone seems to be charging something. Then it says the manager position succession is complete. Various beings appear, as we see the protagonist in a stylish pose. Sumu seems different. The device welcomes the protagonist, informing him that he is now participating in Gachu. Outside the raid cave, everyone is exhausted from running so much. Dokyo asks how unlucky he is to encounter an elite monster in a C+ dungeon. The others thank the guy since he saved everyone by using Sue as bait. Dokyo says he was ready for something like this to happen. Right behind him, our protagonist curses the guy for leaving him behind. He was about to say something, but is interrupted when Sue tries to attack him. The protagonist's movement is easily stopped. Dokyo counterattacks, punching him in the jaw, and asks if he forgot he is rank F. The guy was going to ask how Sue survived, but doesn't matter, because it saves him the trouble of looking for a new editor. Sue asks if this is serious because he won't work for someone who tried to kill him. Dokyo says it was the protagonist who begged for money to pay for his sister's medication. Armoy pulls his hand back, then says he has a video of the guy leaving him behind, which would get many views. He says he could kill the protagonist right now. Sue says he might die, but he will make Dokyo lose his job and get arrested for his actions. The guy threatens, saying if that video is released, his sister might not be so safe. He leaves telling everyone to grab their things. Sumu says Dakyul will regret this bitterly. Later in his room, the protagonist is looking for the so-called GodTube. Our hero introduces us to YouTube and his reality in the most famous channel, there is the Hunter. However, in this GodTube, everything is different. Mythological gods and mystical creatures. Legendary hero figures. Sue asks if these are the people who run this app. In his mind, the protagonist wonders who that guy is and why he gave him this phone. His situation is very confusing. But if this is true, if these creatures really exist, they at least start with 1 million subscribers. Sue says this isn't so bad and maybe you should give it a try. The protagonist clicks to subscribe to a random god's channel. Sue seems very confused by all of this. Our dear system appears, saying Sue subscribed to a channel and now only needs 2 more. The S+ rank classification appears. He asks if this is real because it's impossible for this to happen. The people who fought against the Demon Lord, the 13 heroes, only they had an S+ rank. The boy is impressed to have gotten this rank just by subscribing to the channel. Sumu ponders if this is real because he doesn't feel any difference in his body. Maybe this could only have improved his intelligence and observation, so he thinks it might take a while to notice the difference. Our future monster enters Hercules' video, and then subscribes by pressing the red button. The system alerts that the protagonist subscribed to another channel and gained SS strength. He is startled and hits his desk, suddenly breaking it. He realizes he received an SS rank trait. Our dear system alerts that this increased his proficiency, and now it is at 1%. Sue is shocked to have received an S trait just by subscribing. He immediately shouts, asking what the hell this GodTube is. The system alerts that the proficiency of the insight trait increased because he thought hard. Sue realizes he has to reach 100% to fully use the power. Watching Hercules' video, the protagonist decides to click. A crowd is very impressed. Something like a pillar is being lifted using only brute force. During squats, Hercules says this is incredible. These stimulations in his legs. Hercules shouts, saying this is very good. Sue asks what is this he is watching. He tries to unsubscribe by clicking the button multiple times, but the system alerts the protagonist that he cannot unsubscribe. Hercules tells him he can enter anytime he wants but cannot leave just because he wants to. Again, the system alerts that unsubscribing is impossible. Dakyul calls the protagonist. Sue asks why he is calling at this hour. Our boy answers, and Dakyul says he thought Sue would block him. The protagonist asks what he wants, and the guy says Sue has nowhere to go. Sue asks if he called to provoke him. Dakyul asks the protagonist not to be like that because they work together. Sue asks what the guy wants because he has no time to waste. Dakyul says the Ishru called him to stream live, so he asks if Sue wants to go along. The protagonist is surprised to hear this, because Ish is the #1 financial company in Korea, and recently, the group's granddaughter awakened 2 S-rank traits as a hunter, so they must be entering the hunter industry. Dakyul says she's expanding its business, so he asks if Sue will join and he says no. The guy says he will pay 5,000 for the video. He asks again if Sue will go. Smiling, our protagonist says he still won't. Dakyul says this amount is 10 times what he usually pays. With great conviction, the boy asks for 50,000 to make the video. Suddenly, the guy goes crazy, saying that amount is too high. The system alerts that S+ insight proficiency has increased by 2%. Our protagonist corners Dakyul, asking why the group wants to broadcast with him instead of S ranks. The guy tries to play dumb. Sumu says the group's granddaughter has 2 traits, so her grandfather wants her to learn the basics first. And the basics of hunters are to hunt monsters, which is why Dakyul's channel has 210,000 subscribers. The protagonist adds that the guy only got to this point because of his strategies. The reason the president is there is not because of Dakyul's ability, but because of Suu's knowledge. The guy is confused, not knowing what to say. Our boy asks if he doesn't want it. Dakyul is furious for not getting what he wanted. Sue says if the guy can't pay, he should take a loan. The protagonist has a psychopathic look. The next day, we see the 2 in the B-rank dungeon. Stu asks when Dakyul will transfer the rest of the money. He says he will send it when the raid is over. They notice something behind them. We see a girl. She is the granddaughter of the group. Her name is Han Charon. Sue is impressed, saying Han is very beautiful, but by her demeanor it will be difficult to get close. The protagonist says he doesn't care, he just wants to get the money. A gigantic monster appears, intimidating everyone. Sue warns that it is a black troll. Dakyul tries to seem smarter, detailing all the physical traits and that the troll's rank is B. The easiest strategy to defeat is to tear its entire body apart, then cut its heart and head so it cannot regenerate. Without any fear, the girl grabs her sword. She rushes towards the black troll at full speed. Han is ready to deliver a precise blow. She jumps without caring about any strategy. We observe that the girl has good aim, targeting the troll's heart. After that, gracefully and quickly, she cuts the troll's head, theoretically following Dakyul's strategy. A 2 look at Han and she says it was very easy. Strangely, the guy starts to flatter her, saying it's expected from a hunter who awakened as rank S. Han says he is flattering her too much. Our boy notices that the sword the girl is using is not normal. He says it's an Aurelian sword and asks how expensive it is. Looking at the sword, Han gives an approximate value of 20 billion. Dokyo is scared, but Sue was amazed. She asked them to go deeper into the dungeon. A few hours pass since Han asked that. Dokyo steps on blood, a bit impressed with such skill. Han asks to wrap up as she has eliminated all the black trolls. The guy takes her hand and says she worked hard. Dokyo is pissed, thinking he could be noticed by this group, but now he's close to being outshined by that bastard Suwoo. The protagonist says this is quite fun. Something suddenly appears, scaring Siwoo. Dokyo says this is his chance, then says that judging by the size, it must be an elite monster. A bit scared, our boy starts to say that this is not an elite monster, but rather the boss creature of the dungeon. The monster roars, exuding a highly superior power. He raises his hand, ready to strike. Han realizes this, and the only way to survive is to defend. With difficulty, the girl defends against the monster's blow. Dokyo is impressed by her skills. The others, being the biggest traitors possible, flee just like last time. The creature likes the situation it is in, so it decides to give another attack to Han. Still, she dodges, but the monster ends up hitting the ground, throwing debris everywhere. Stones fly and hit the guys who tried to run away. Without much thought, Dokyo also tries to flee. In his mind, his desire to live comes first. He continues to run to immediately escape the place. His attempt seems futile when he sees the boss in front of him, launching a massive attack. Dokyo thought he was already dead because it is impossible to do anything against that. Han defends the blow, making the guy lit again. The boss is very strong and Han can't take it. At that moment, she's thrown far away, but ends up hitting the rock, suffering a lot of damage. Without giving any time, the creature prepares another blow. In her mind, Han says she needs to dodge. Quickly, she climbs up the monster's arm. She goes behind its head to try to cut it. Several attacks are made on its neck, but nothing seems to have any effect. The boss looks back, exuding a giant threat. Han realizes that now there is no escape. The blow is coming firmly and strongly in her direction. She jumps with extreme speed and dexterity. Even so, the creature manages to hit her. Fortunately, she can defend against this colossal blow. Sumu sees that it will be impossible to defeat the monster. Even though Han has 2 disranked traits, she is just an inexperienced hunter. In the same place, the boss makes several attacks. The protagonist realizes that the only choice he can make there would be to leave Han behind and flee like a coward. Otherwise, Su will die if he stays, or he can believe in the power he got from Gatsu. Bumping into the protagonist, Dokyo runs by, pretending he's too scared to think of anything. Our boy remembers the words Dokyo said, that this only happened because of his poor investigation. Su recalls that the guy is the worst of the trash. We see the girl suffering against the dungeon boss. While in Su's mind, he could only think that he wouldn't be able to win, but his body moves involuntarily. The protagonist tries to get the creature's attention while saying that money and prestige mean nothing when you die. The boss does not retreat and continues to strike. Our boy says that leaving Han and fleeing would be no different than being just like that piece of trash. The two's blows clash, causing a great shockwave. The creature doesn't understand what Su just did. Han says the protagonist deflected the monster's attack. She then asks who Su really is. A blue aura is around our hero. The protagonist breathes deeply. We see that this power is from Hercules. The boss's hand is stuck in the ceiling. Soon he uses the other to hit Saiwu. The blow hits and the protagonist finds it a bit difficult to hold it. Even so, the blows keep clashing. The two have trouble dealing with each other, but Su tells Han to act. She obeys the protagonist's order. Then she makes a big leap to start the attack. The creature sees it but can't do anything because Su is blocking it. The blow hits his chest as Han tries to hit the heart. She moves away to start another strike, doing several flips before landing on the ground. Then she unsheaths her sword to cut the monster. The girl, with extreme difficulty, cuts the boss's head. The two watch the creature fall slowly. Su wonders if it's over because something still feels strange. Bosses can usually have a variant, thus being able to transform into a second form. Harmoy is right, and the monster starts regenerating its head. He acts quickly and grabs Han. She screams in pain while the protagonist can't do anything. Even after doing several impossible things, he questions if the Gatsu abilities are real. Still, Su says he will buy time because if Han dies, he dies too. She asks the boy to run quickly. Doing his best, the protagonist asks Han to aim for the heart. The girl manages to escape the creature's claws. After that, she falls to the ground because of exhaustion. Getting up, she says she will do what Su said. Han jumps again to attack the boss. The protagonist shouts for her to trust him. The creature realizes something is wrong. When it tries to do something, Su holds its arm. Han rushes forward with all her might. She begins to tear the entire arm of the boss. After that, Han manages to hit the heart. The protagonist says he can only hold for a few more milliseconds. Then he tells her that the monster has 2 hearts. She gets surprised by this statement. The protagonist knows she will figure out where the other one is with her 6th sense. Han goes toward the other place she thinks might be where the second heart is. With all her strength, she's about to deliver her final blow. Then she lands the strike, making the boss roar in pain. The protagonist runs to help. Sue tells her to move away before his blow hits her. The boy prepares a big, furious attack. Our system alerts that the abilities have been temporarily increased. Han moves away, and right behind is the protagonist about to defeat the monster. The boss's eye reflects the image of Sue. The creature's head explodes as we see the protagonist slashing through. Han sees that they finally defeated the boss. The girl tries to say something to the protagonist, but he doesn't seem to be doing well. Taking just a few steps forward, due to exhaustion, Sue faints. Watching, Han wonders who our hero is. The next day, Sue wakes up, wondering where he is. Someone asks for permission to enter. This person is Han Sharon, who casually sits next to him. Sue questions why she is there. The girl says she brought him to the hospital because he was seriously injured. Han asks how the protagonist feels while our boy thinks she is very close. She gets a little closer. Then she touches Sue's head to see if he has caught a cold. The girl stands still in front of him for a few seconds. Soon she says that Sue has a slight fever. Next, she says they haven't introduced themselves yet, so she asks the protagonist's name. Sue questions this because she should already know his information to have brought him to the hospital. Suddenly, Han says she wanted to hear it from his mouth. The protagonist ponders if she can read minds, but it might just be a skill of the S-rank's sixth sense trait. Han says she wants to propose an offer to Sue. He asks what the proposal is. The girl asks if Sue wants to join her group. The protagonist doesn't quite understand. Han says she will pay $1 billion per year. Additionally, all the monsters they defeat will be equally shared in value. She adds that she heard Sue has a brother and that he is sick, and if the protagonist accepts the offer, she will admit him to a private hospital. At this moment, Sue thinks carefully about the offer. The boy asks what he did to deserve this price. She only asks the protagonist to elaborate strategies for all the monsters they will face from now on. Night comes for our dear hero. The protagonist questions if he should rest. Sue remembers what Han said. This time he knows that Gatsu is real, an app that makes an S-rank hunter seem like a mere extra. And then he adds that he will do everything to find a cure to save his sister Siwa. Some time ago, his sister suffered something in the dungeon, and now what he knows is that it is a blood disease with no cure. But if he uses GodTube and learns all its features, he might find something to help her. Only all the ingredients there are very expensive. For now, he will edit the video that will earn him $50 million. While editing the video, Sue realizes something, remembering that Han's sword is worth $20 billion. Maybe he can sell equipment. With this, he can get millions. To subscribe, he has to pay a fee of $1 million. We see the blacksmith Hephaestus recording a video. Without worrying, our boy clicks the button. After that, the protagonist is amazed, because he got an SS rank trait of God's metallurgy. In the video, we are in a forge. Someone is hammering the iron with everything they've got. This is Hephaestus teaching how to make an item. Sue wonders why the gods are so eccentric. The system alerts that the proficiency of SS rank metallurgy increased by 1%. The next day in the hospital square, the boy is doing push-ups to improve his physique. The nurses say his body has improved a lot compared to the last time. Stu asks if his body is really that beautiful. They say that because of the exercises, maybe the protagonist can be discharged tomorrow. The system alerts that the proficiency of SS rank super strength increased by 1%. Sue says that the last time his muscles got hurt because of the super strength, so he has to train to get used to his new body. The protagonist's sister arrives, calling his attention. Sue says she heard you will be discharged tomorrow, and adds that when she saw him in the hospital, she was scared because he seemed to be in a serious condition. Sue thought you would stay for a month, and Sue realizes she is sad because he will have to leave. Our boy asks her not to be afraid of the treatment because money will not be lacking. At this moment, the little boy says he knows he is receiving free treatment. The protagonist is a little embarrassed. He says that Han said she had no siblings, but Sue seemed like one to her. Sue asks how on earth Sue met Han. He says she visits him, leaving our protagonist surprised with this information, and adds that whenever she comes to the hospital, she asks about Sue's condition. His brother asks if he is dating Han. Our boy asks Seo not to talk nonsense, and to go inside because he is going somewhere. His brother, curious, asks where he is going. Smiling, the protagonist says he's going to make money. Already inside the dungeon, Sue is looking for monsters. He says he is a little nervous since it is his first time. Soon hears a noise and realizes the creatures are coming. We observe a legion of F-rank goblins. All the goblins start picking up stones to attack the protagonist. He dodges them all easily. Although Sue knew goblins acted in groups, there were many more than expected. Soon after, the creatures grab weapons to attack the boy. The goblin tries its luck, but Sue dodges and counterattacks with a punch. With ease, the blow crushes the monster. The protagonist sees that he is stronger than he expected. All the goblins, after seeing the scene, hesitate to act. Sue calmly walks toward them. The boy stretches a bit because the fight is about to heat up. Smiling, he says the goblins can come at him. A few hours later, in another place outside the dungeon, throwing the bodies on the ground, Sue asks how much you will earn for this. The guy says the protagonist only brought remains. This is Wang, the owner of the Sue Smithy family. Wang teaches Sue the metallurgy method since this guy is experienced and has been in this business for 20 years. It doesn't matter if you have good materials. What matters is if you have a good blacksmith capable of performing miracles even with scraps. Our boy's eyes shine. Wang says that was a demonstration, and now it's Suwoo's turn to try. As the protagonist goes to the forge, the guy thinks the boy is a bit strange, because instead of asking to be his apprentice or paying for equipment, the kid asked to borrow his forge. Wang allowed it out of pure curiosity but sees that Suwoo is just a beginner. Probably the boy must have seen a video on YouTube and thought it would be easy. But on the first hammer strike on the iron, a few hours later on the same day, a beautiful girl, a representative of the Soan company, her name is Kim Soan. Wang asks if she had arrived and she says yes because what girl would enter a forge like this? Kim calls Wang the best blacksmith in Korea, so she came personally to place an order. The girl always brags about being from the Soan family. She then goes to her bag and says she has many materials available, so she decided to supply a bit. Sounds of hammers are heard and she starts getting angry. Then she shouts, asking the protagonist to stop hammering. Calling Suwoo an idiot, she asks what he is doing. Grabbing the sword, Kim says the work is horrible. Wang asks what she thinks and the girl replies that the blade was made crudely. The guy questions what the materials used were goblin remains. She's a bit impressed, questioning if she heard correctly. Wang says that the sword was made under the worst conditions and still made by a novice, making Kim ask if he accepted an apprentice. Actually, he says he tried that auction, but watching him hammering, it was impossible to say that was his first time. With every hammer strike on the iron, was like a heartbeat. Wang says he has never seen anyone make a weapon with that material and that the boy still rejected being his disciple. Kim turns to see our protagonist. Suwoo continues hammering without stopping. The girl seems to be thinking about something. Our boy finishes the blade he was making. The system alerts that the proficiency of SS rank metallurgy increased by 4%. Suwoo asks how he can sell this weapon. Kim asks if the protagonist wants to sell the spear. She then introduces herself as a representative of the Soan company. Suwoo seems to recognize this name because it is a company focused on the hunter industry. The girl says her company buys the best products in Korea, so she asks if the boy wants to sell. A little swindler, Suwoo asks how much she will pay, and without worry, the girl says she will give $1 million. After that, the protagonist began to work hard. He started making weapons like a madman. Shots are heard outside the place. That's Kim getting happy with the result. She's excited because she made a contract with the S Group. The equipment is a high quality. Kim says it's all thanks to Suwoo, so if he needs anything, she will be there to help. She then asked the boy to check his account. Looking at his cell phone, Suwoo wasn't expecting anything amazing. But when he saw the amount deposited in his account, he was unexpectedly calm. Kim asks what happened and tells him to look again. Right after checking the amount of money, Suwoo was very happy and excited. On the same day, we see the protagonist thinking about something. He's looking at his bank, seeing how much money he has. The boy thinks he has to subscribe to a channel that can help his sister. These channels are of legendary doctors, some from the East. Suwoo says to maintain these 3 channels per month, he needs at least 500 million. For now, he will choose just one to benefit from. He thinks seriously about the matter since he can only have one power. Even after a few minutes, the protagonist doesn't think of anything. Biting his lip, he realizes he has to do it soon. Then Suwoo clicks the red button to subscribe to the channel. Noises can be heard behind the door. Wang says that high-quality materials are not easy to polish, so the polishing should be minimal. Kim arrives at the place, smiling. The guy asks why the girl keeps coming there, and she responds that she is there for Suwoo. Our current blacksmith says he was waiting for her, making Kim enthusiastic about the news. Suwoo says that last time the girl got everything he wanted, so he asks if she can bring those materials. A bit upset, Kim said she will do her best to fulfill the request. She lists all the ingredients that are on the paper. Suwoo asks if it will be difficult to obtain them, and the girl says it is possible but will be expensive. The cost will be approximately 300 million, but she can give a discount of 20 million. Our boy says he needs those ingredients to increase his medical proficiency. Kim asks if she should get the items. With few choices, Suwoo says yes. The protagonist calculates how much all this will cost. In the end, he can make more money selling equipment. A great idea comes to his mind at this exact moment. Suwoo can make a lot of money using YouTube. In another place, we observe people riding the subway. A guy in a red jacket says there's nothing to watch. Suddenly he sees the protagonist's channel and asks what that is. For a moment he thinks, but then clicks the button without hesitation. In the video, we see a herd of monsters that look like hippos. And in the middle of them, surprisingly there's an imposter. We see Suwoo disguised as a hippo among the creatures. Looking at the camera, the protagonist asks if we knew that hippos are not horses. The guy doesn't understand what Suwoo is doing and asks if it's some kind of cosplay. Our boy says these monsters are called hippodons, and as you can see, they look like hippos. But these creatures are not related to horses. Apparently, the guy seems interested in the video. We observe that the protagonist is being the guide to the world of Monster Realm, teaching various characteristics in detail. Pulling a shining red cloth, Suwoo says he will teach how to conquer a hippodon. The first step is to excite them with a red cloth. We see the guy doesn't understand anything, but is still entertained by the video. Suwoo points the red cloth at the herd ahead. At the same moment, all the hippodons observe. Immediately, their eyes turn red with excitement. Abruptly, they run towards the protagonist. Without fear, Suwoo continues to wave the cloth in his hand. At this moment, the boy says he will teach the second step to conquer a hippodon. Just hit them and then grab them, making the guy wonder if this is the strategy. The protagonist runs towards the herd of hippodons without any fear. He smiles, seeming not to fear death. Suwoo and the hippodons clash violently. The dust settles little by little, and apparently, nothing is wrong. But a single man stands after this difficult battle. That man is the protagonist, who looks at the camera and asks if they found it easy to conquer a hippodon. The guy is left speechless, not knowing what to say. Still, several hippodons were drawn to the place. Like a madman, Suwoo begins to defeat them one by one. He makes it seem quite easy, even though it is almost impossible for an ordinary human. Without any failure, the innocent continues glued to his phone. After defeating them all, the protagonist tells them to subscribe and leave a like. Several people comment saying that was insane. The numbers of likes and views increased drastically. Sumu says that it went as planned. Later, we see that the protagonist reached incredible 126,000 views. Several comments mention that it was extremely hilarious and funny. Sumu says they really liked the concept of the last video. But this video only did well because of the power of the algorithm, so he can't rely on weak monsters forever. For now, he will make more videos since it is going so well. The protagonist is doing well with a routine, since his specialization is knowledge about monsters and wisdom to form strategies. That's why having 1 million subscribers is not just a dream. But unfortunately, not everything is perfect because there's a big and significant problem. Suwoo questions if what he has in his hand is blood. He starts to feel dizzy and is about to faint. Even so, he wants to continue editing the video. He loses consciousness little by little. But when he falls, he ends up hitting his head on the corner of the table. Falling to the ground, he feels a stinging pain. Suwoo realizes that he has been working too much lately and maybe should rest a bit. Our boy wakes up seeing that he fell asleep after falling. Thanks to Hercules' strength, nothing worse happened. Suwoo picks up his phone saying he needs to edit the videos and questions how much time has passed. He checks the time and then gets very scared. The protagonist thinks he will die from overwork before making money. That's why he urgently needs to hire an editor. Later, at an establishment called Cafe Eden, Suwoo is holding his phone, checking something. There are several candidates who volunteer to work, making the protagonist wonder if it's because the salary is a bit high. The salary of 3 million with the potential to earn more if the view count is good. Suwoo says he will probably choose the best editor. Watching a video, the boy comments that the sound effects are good and the editing is better than his own. The protagonist had invited this editor. However, he is late despite agreeing to meet at 1 o'clock. The boy's name is Park, and we see his message agreeing to come. Suwoo wonders if this guy is actually an old man since his way of speaking is too formal. But what matters is his experience. The protagonist sends a message asking where Park is, but he hasn't even read it yet. Suwoo says he will wait just a little longer. A few hours pass and there's still no sign of the guy. The protagonist gets pissed off and stands up from the table. At that moment, the editor arrives, apologizing for being late. Suwoo is extremely angry and then looks to the side. This is our shining editor, Park Dyaku. We see that the boy is startled because he was expecting an old man or something like that. Anyway, Suwoo asks why she's late, and she explains that she ended up editing a video late into the night and didn't read his message because she was in a hurry. The protagonist asks what video it was, and she says it was the video he sent for editing. Suwoo is impressed because he sent the video yesterday and today is already ready. On average, Park took 3 hours to edit the entire video. She is startled, asking what is wrong. The protagonist catches her attention. She becomes alert, questioning if she did something wrong. Brilliantly, Suwoo asks when she can start, and Park says she can start immediately. Our boy says that Park will make 3 videos a week, of course receiving a bonus if the video does well. He says that from now on she'll be under his care, and the girl seems a little emotional. Suwoo extends his hand to greet her. Suddenly, the girl bangs her head on the table, saying it will be an honor to work with him. People run in saying there has been a dungeon break and all the monsters have escaped. Some people say the shock is rank C and nearby residents must evacuate. Park shouts that they need to get out of there, but quickly Suwoo says that she said she could start working immediately. She doesn't understand if she heard correctly. With a mischievous look on his face, the protagonist smiles. Suwoo hands her the phone and asks her to follow him, making Park ask where they are going. Directly, the protagonist says they are going to make money. Everyone runs scared, but Suwoo goes against the crowd. Running, shouts for her to start filming. Right after, Park starts recording. Several monsters are coming while voices say to run. Without hesitation, Suwoo runs towards all the orcs. He easily finishes one with extreme speed. The protagonist asks viewers to subscribe and leave a like to activate notifications. Like a madman, the boy says he will start making money immediately. People arrive to evacuate the citizens. Heads fly and people at the scene are impressed. Their glasses fall off and they ask what this is. The girl is recording and a madman is slashing all the monsters, who, after a brief battle, were defeated with much elegance. Again, the protagonist asks everyone to subscribe. Later, Park is editing the video she made that day. Looking at the comments, she asks why the protagonist is so popular. Even editing his video, the girl didn't understand the theme or content. But one thing is certain, her boss is a lunatic. Park questions if she will be able to keep up while her brothers are right behind her cheering for her. Happily, her brothers ask if she wants to eat fried chicken. Park observes, thinking they are very cute, and adds that she will work hard for her dear little brothers. The next day at the forge the protagonist borrowed. The weapon turned out well because it was made from Ranksy orcs. The system alerts that the proficiency of SS rank metallurgy increased by 14% and says that this sword at least can be donated for free. For some reason our boy is not disappointed and then decides to try again. His proficiency increased by 14%. Considering how much he had before, this is an incredible evolution. Kim arrives and says that the quality of the protagonist's sword improves every day. Wang looks amazed at Su's talent. The girl gets closer, saying she knows he will sell this weapon. He responds yes, but the price will not be low. Kim says that the protagonist's face has improved a lot compared to the last time. Before, Su's dark circles were big and she thought he was a zombie instead of a human. Our boy knows this because Park is editing his videos, so he has time to sleep. He adds that he is paying more because she's going into dungeons with him to record. At this moment, the protagonist is more certain than before that Docule is trash. Subu says he is grateful and has no complaints about the edits. The protagonist asks what happened to the medicinal herbs he requested last time. Kim says she got everything of course because she couldn't disappoint Subu. Our boy says she got the resources very quickly. She says that the Soin company works with the best products in Korea, and the protagonist doesn't understand what that has to do with the speed. Stu asks the total price and Kim says it will cost approximately 21,244 million. Of course, the protagonist almost collapses at this price and Kim says she adjusted it to 200 million since this order is from our boy. The girl asks where Sue will use so many medicinal herbs. The greatest swindler in the universe says he will use them for a clinical trial. Sue is watching the healer's video. This person is named Huacho, a doctor who works miracles. The guy presents multiple pieces of information. Sue doesn't understand a word of what Huacho is saying, and at this rate he won't be able to increase his proficiency in divine medical arts. The system alerts that the proficiency of SS rank insight has increased, making our boy say that the wrong skill improved. Fortunately, the proficiency in insight makes him understand much faster, as if it had been set to easy mode. Thus, proficiency in divine medical arts increased by 5%. On his first attempt, he made something that can at least be called edible. Sue tries it, saying that since it was made from Huacho's videos, it shouldn't kill him. Minutes later, the protagonist is almost dead on the floor, saying that his money went along with the herbs. A notification arrives on his phone and Sue picks it up to check. Due to consuming that dubious medicine, his super strength proficiency increased slightly. Seeing this, he says he needs to at least lick what is on the floor to get stronger. Sue goes alone into a dungeon full of bats. These are E+ rank monsters, but there is a reason he came here. First, it was to record a video, and the second reason is that he wants equipment. Finally, to study the diseases of the bats, as there are hundreds of them, and various diseases are situated there. The bats have resistance to blood diseases, and through them, he can find a cure for his brother. This won't be easy, but with divine medical arts, it will be possible. The protagonist feels something behind him, but this sensation doesn't seem like a bat, rather a trait. So he goes to check the place out of caution. At the same moment, he says these are Dakyul's locations. Our boy says this is a big coincidence. Or perhaps they might be there following him since there is no internet or any means of communication in a dungeon. This means one could eliminate a person and no one would know, making the protagonist question what he should do. Moving forward, Sue says he doesn't need to think about it, since he will defeat them all and force them to spill information. The guys are saying something about being sure if Sue entered there. One of them says he saw him enter this dungeon. The guy named Ju asks if he really went in there since they can't see him, and the kid named Ji says Sue might already be dead. Jiwoo says that could be it since the protagonist was a hunter without a trait. Jay says Sue was smart and might have created a great strategy to deal with the bats. Ju says that after seeing his video, maybe he doesn't need much of a strategy. Ju says it's all CGI. They topple looking for our boy. The protagonist gives them a little scare, and then asks where Dakyul is. Ju says he didn't feel Sue coming, and he says he didn't think they would talk willingly. Everyone's on alert, questioning where the protagonist came from. Innocently, the kid runs to attack, and quickly Sue punches him in the stomach. Ju flies away at extreme speed. He's all beaten up, lying on the ground, unable to do anything. Our boy says he will ask a very friendly question. We notice he gave up on the question and went straight to aggression. The others don't seem intimidated and call the protagonist a bastard. Immediately, his body flies against the wall. The actor doesn't understand what the hell is happening. After realizing he can't win, he tried to be friendly. As Sue approaches him, he shouts saying he will tell everything. Our boy says he learned something important, that he can never trust the words of someone whose limbs are intact. The guy says that Dakyul sent them there to teach the protagonist a lesson. Sue tells the kid to speak formally, showing respect to his superior. Our hero doesn't understand why Dokyul is so interested in him, and the boy next to him says he doesn't understand either. Sumu shows his hand, and the extra says he really doesn't know anything. Our boy pauses and then lowers his hand. He asks if the boy knows where Dokyul is, and warns him not to forget what happened to his friends. The kid asks if they aren't dead, and Sumu says he would never dirty his hands with such people. Our protagonist leaves, telling the kid to inform Dokyul that he is next. He then questions if it will be difficult to inform him. Suddenly, only screams can be heard in the dungeon. Sometime later, we even see one on crutches. Behind the guys is Suwu, with not so friendly intentions. They try to explain the situation to Dokyul, but the protagonist says their plan to lure him was incredible. The kid gets scared, saying it's not like that, and then runs, trying to escape from our hero's clutches. The others also run, apologizing to Dokyul. Suwu says the only one left now is him, and adds how much of a jerk he was for his friends to abandon him like that. Dokyul becomes furious and questions why the protagonist did this. How can an E-rank hunter have so much power? Suwu asks if the guy likes him so much to even send henchmen. Dokyul says there is no reason, and even if there were, he wouldn't tell. Smiling, our boy says he knew it would come to this. In a swift move, the protagonist advances, preparing a strike full of hatred against the guy. Dokyul draws his sword and tries to counterattack. Their attacks clash forcefully. Sumu says he will make the guy spill the beans after landing a big punch. The protagonist knows Dokyul is different, but he is still a B-rank hunter. Next, the guy tries a surprise attack, but the boy dodges. Immediately, he moves away to maintain distance for his opponent. Sumu says, honestly, he's a bit scared. It seems he still lacks the skill to handle a B-rank hunter. Quickly, he charges, and a protagonist says that even though the guy is fast, he can still dodge easily. Lately, he worked as Dokyul's editor, was mistreated in the dungeon, and beaten for trivia reasons. Sumu says he has seen the guy's fighting style many, many times. After editing so many videos, he even knows the movements or inclinations of his body. The proficiency of his plus rank insight increases by 0.5%. They start fighting frantically without stopping. All the blows seem decisive, yet the fight doesn't end. Sumu dodges the sword, and Dokyul is a bit tired. His thoughts focus on understanding how the protagonist is dodging so much. This is something only an S rank can do. The boy's blow sends him flying away. This last attack had a significant effect. Dokyul says he has seen Suu's videos on YouTube, but this is on a completely different level. Going mad, the guy says he will kill the protagonist at any cost. His sword becomes covered with an aura. Suu asks him not to do it, thinking that he didn't expect Dokyul to go all out. But now that it has come to this, there is no other choice. Because at this moment, he will also go all out. His muscles might tear, so he won't fight for long. Our boy instantly disappears from where he was. His speed so immense that it looks like he teleported in front of Dokyul. His blow will be destructive and massive. When it hits, it causes a huge explosion. The entire place is destroyed because of the attack. Someone arrives, telling the guys to close the area. These guys in the place are from the inspection bureau. After that attack, Sue remains standing with a victorious aura. Everyone's watching the protagonist. The purple-haired woman asks if he is Sue, an E-rank hunter. With the sword pointing at Dokyul's neck, he says yes. She introduces herself as Lee Minjung, the head of the 4th team on the inspection bureau guards. Lee asks if the hunter Dokyul tried to assassinate Sue, and our boy says yes, and that he even has a video as proof. The girl says the video has been confirmed and adds that this is not something easy to forget. But Sue is an awakened without traits. Our hero says that this organization kills criminal hunters and is composed of at least A-rank hunters. He says that the traitless grade does not refer to the hunter's rank, and Lee says she knows Sue is an E-rank hunter. The protagonist says there is no reason to answer any questions since he is the victim. She apologizes and says she will handle this case correctly. Lee says that Dokyul will never see the light of day again. Our boy leaves, saying he will leave the case in her hands. Another person arrives, saying something, but Lee just thinks it's very strange. The girl this time is Jung Sua, and Lee asks if she has any class. Jung says she was promoted to rank B, not rank A. A dense black aura appears and throws her to the ground. Jung doesn't quite understand what is happening. Standing, Lee says the girl still can't endure it. Jung says that's obvious because she is just ordinary in front of her. Lee says Sue didn't feel anything at all, and Jung questions if that's possible since he is just an E-rank hunter. Jung says they should have arrested the boy since people lie about their class. Lee interrupts, saying he wasn't strange. After that, the other doesn't understand anything. With our protagonist, he says that was a close call, and if his channel gets more famous, he will become a target for criminals. He only managed to confront Dokyul because he already knew his tactics. With the challenges ahead, it's better to increase his SS rank super strength. Unfortunately, it's still a 1%. To gain more, he needs to be a subscriber to the channel. Then the protagonist says maybe it's a good thing. Someone is commenting on something. It's Hercules, questioning how a human can see his channel. Sue asks if he can't access preferential training, and Hercules says that's not it, because he can't go to the protagonist's plane to do that. Sue remembers the two who were fighting and thinks they might have been gods. Hercules says he can't teach in person, but he can still teach. He starts explaining that the protagonist's muscles, especially the triceps, are in a mess. The proficiency of super strength increases after Sue knows this mere information. Hercules informs that all muscles are important, but the muscles in the back are very important. They take care of the body's central balance when it comes to bold movements. The protagonist questions what the hell he's watching. Hercules says he created a divine martial art. It's all martial arts combined into one, and this martial art was the one he used to defeat the Hydra. The posterior muscles are important to endure such movements. Hercules asks what happens when the building's pillars fall, and our hero says it collapses. Kicking the ground hard, Hercules says the same applies to the body. Even without understanding anything, the proficiency of super strength is increasing. Hercules tells the protagonist to do push-ups to train the basics of the body, breathing, and exhaling. Sedentary Sue can't take it since he's only been editing videos and drinking Red Bull. Night is approaching, but the training is just beginning. Various alerts appear saying the proficiency of SS rank super strength increased by 0.12%. The protagonist sends a message in a file to Park, saying the editing theme is Speedrunner. Before opening the file, she doesn't know what to expect. Starting the video, we see entrance of a dungeon. Sue says the cave behind him is where the bats live. At this moment, he will present new Speedrunner content from the dungeon. Park starts editing the video, adding sounds and effects. She wonders why go where there are bats since visibility is not that good. That's how the protagonist sets himself apart from others. Sue says the current record is 58 seconds. That day he will challenge that record and break it. For this part, Park says she will add a timer. The protagonist's eyes shine. At that moment he gives a super kick to the dungeon. The girl doesn't understand anything at all. Then she's impressed, questioning if a dungeon can collapse. The video ends with Sue saying the dungeon is complete. Park doesn't know what she's watching, but the man is good. The views surpass millions. Someone commented on the video, and he sees it was the former record holder. Sue says she panicked when she saw her first record being smashed. Because of this comment, millions of viewers are already guaranteed. The protagonist thinks he should make more provocative videos. Sue checks his proficiency and sees it's at 2.1%. He is surprised since with 2% he destroyed an entire dungeon, thanks to Hercules' training. How will it be when he learns the divine arts? The protagonist says he urgently needs to ask Hercules to teach him as soon as possible. Then we see that the moment Sue asks, Hercules refuses. Our boy says he won the divine arts in the event, and Hercules says those are different things. For now, he is giving individual muscle training, not combat training, and the protagonist's body currently can't handle it. Divine combat is tailored to Hercules' power, so Sue can't have or learn it. Our boy says he is using Hercules' power. Hercules is impressed, while the protagonist simply says he thought the training was for that. Hercules says this isn't supposed to happen. Sue says he possesses Hercules' power anyway. The god still doesn't understand the situation. Our hero thought his power came automatically with a subscription through Gatu. After this, he shouts in surprise. Sue realizes something is very wrong with this. Hercules asks how the protagonist did this. The boy explains that he gained the power through Gatu, and this applies to all the gods he subscribed to. Sue asks if this is strange. Hercules says it's ridiculous, questioning who gains powers by subscribing to a channel. The protagonist says that despite this, he can really obtain the powers of the gods. Hercules pauses to think because even as a human without divinity, Sue is still connected to Gatu. The boy wonders what a human with divinity is, because he knows who is the person that opened this possibility. Sue explains what happened for him to have Gatu. Hercules says one reality cannot interfere with another, and from what the protagonist explained, his account belongs to the Gatu manager. Our boy asks if he has met any managers, and Hercules says only a few. Hercules says if every manager could gain the powers of the gods just by subscribing, it would be the gods of the universe. Even so, the protagonist managed it. Our boy asks Hercules to accept him as a disciple, but the god refuses, saying that having disciples only brings problems. Sue says he learned super strength from him, but Hercules says that's completely different. Giving normal training is tiring enough. Imagine training divine arts. The protagonist says he has a question. He asks what being a Gatu subscriber would mean, and Hercules responds that it's like becoming an element of divinity. In short, the more subscribers a god has, the more divine power they will have. Sunu says he will make a deal with Hercules. If he can get 100 subscribers, Hercules will have to teach him the divine arts. The god questions how the protagonist will do that. Our boy says to just trust him, it will work. In a magical step, Hercules' subscribers increase. At the same moment, he kneels saying Sue is his master. The protagonist says he will teach him content methods, but for that, Hercules will have to teach him the divine arts. Yet Sue still questions the use of subscribers. The god says it's like their confidence. Our hero realizes that when subscribers increase, the god's stats also rise. Anyway, he asks Hercules to teach him the divine arts, and the god accepts, also saying he expects him to fulfill this part of the deal. The god says the first thing Sue must do to learn the divine arts is to train his muscles to the maximum. Hercules says he will demonstrate the training. Suddenly, the protagonist's ear starts to hurt. The god makes a powerful strike in the air. Instantly, the entire place is destroyed. Suwu sees that this strike is fast and very strong at the same time. An immense pressure emanates and the system alerts that the protagonist experienced the divine arts and his proficiency increased by 11%. Our boy is frightened by such power, and this mere demonstration gave him a lot of proficiency. Hercules says the protagonist still can't handle the training, so it's good to be cautious. To withstand this power, Suwu must train his brain muscles. Our boy understands that to resist this power, he needs to strengthen his mental strength. The protagonist says he should have said that from the beginning, but he still needs to learn. Hercules says it would be impossible, but given the current situation, Suwu might have the capacity to learn. He doesn't understand what the god is saying, and he says the protagonist can obtain the powers of the gods. Our boy says he can get skills that specialize in mental strength, so he can withstand the training. Hercules says he recommends Kong Q's channel. At the moment, Suwu thinks about the fee he will have to pay to subscribe to the god's channel. His account balance is worse than last time. The subscriber fee is 10 million per month. Kim arrives at the place saying good morning. She brought some items the protagonist requested. Suwu asks if the price is 1 million, and the girl laughs a little. It says the bill is 113 million. Kim leaves thanking him for the purchase and adding that sewing products are the best. Before leaving, she asks what the protagonist will use these items for, and Suwu says he will use them to make equipment. Our boy thinks he needs to work to earn money and also increase his proficiency in metallurgy. Unfortunately, at this moment, money is both his greatest enemy and best friend. But now is not the time to be sad. He has to start working hard immediately. Wang notices that today the protagonist is working more intensely than before. He approaches Kim and asks what brings her to his smithy. He suddenly becomes startled. Wang sees Suwu working like never before. His skills are making the place shine. A light emanates and reflects off everything. Even after doing something impressive, the system says the protagonist created something at least discardable. The SS rank metallurgy proficiency increases by +5. Everyone's admiring Suwu's work while praising him. Without wasting time, the protagonist asks Kim how much it's worth. She says the equipment is very good and doesn't think any client has the money to buy it. Suwu feels a bit down since he has many expenses. CEO's medicine, Hercules' training fee, and the current channel of Kong Q. Our boy asks her not to feel pressured since it's a discardable item, making Kim question if she heard right. She says she will do her best to sell the item. Kim thinks about putting the item in an auction since from her perspective it has an inestimable value. Sometime later, they are at the auction and the girl used Wang's identity, who is of age to register. The woman announces the next item and says is something extremely admirable. Everyone is gossiping about the item gaining notable attention. She shouts, presenting the 2 gauntlets. She mentions all the details of the item, including its duration and rank, which is A. Everyone in the audience is excited because to them the gauntlets are on a completely different level. The woman says it is not an enchanted equipment, but still has a special effect that increases power by 5%. People say the gauntlets are great for use as auxiliary equipment. She says she will start the auction, and the starting price is 10 million. People give high bids ranging from 20 million to 50 million. Everyone's going crazy, betting all they have. The equipment price is skyrocketing, reaching the inestimable value of 250 million. The woman's eyes shine after seeing the bids reach 350 million. A person in the back bids 2 billion. We see that it's Ham Charon, who apparently wants the gauntlet very much. The presenter doesn't know what to do because 2 billion is a lot of money. In the back, the police offer 2.1 billion. Lee stands strong and imposing, determined to get the item. Her guards don't understand the reason for the risky bid. But Han is still in the game and says she will pay 3 billion. Lee, already pissed off, bids 3.1 billion. The war between the two begins and Han doesn't give up, bidding 4 billion. Everyone is shocked while the presenter asks if anyone will make a higher bid. She starts the countdown and in the end, no one else responds and the equipment is sold for 4 billion. Victorious, the girl walks out as if she hadn't spent a fortune. A mocking smile can be seen. At Wine's brother's smithy, Kim didn't know the equipment would sell for such an absurd price while the protagonist is trembling. Looking at his bank account, 3.6 billion were added to it. We see that taxes still apply, taking 400 million from our boy, but he still has a lot of money. He advances thanking Kim for putting the item in the auction, leaving her surprised but saying that Suwu is crushing her. The girl can't take it, saying she can't breathe anymore. The protagonist lets go, apologizing for doing that. Kim says she has a lot to thank Suwu for since, because of him, her family's auction house became the center of attention. Our boy was going to thank Wang, but he says it was all thanks to Suwu, and that he had nothing to do with it. In his thoughts, the protagonist says he will try to teach a Festus skill to Wang. Before that, he needs to pay Kong Q's subscription fee. Suwu is annoyed because anyway, it's a lot of money to spend so frivolously. Our boy subscribes, but even on his face, it's clear he's not very happy. Later, Suwu's having lunch with his brother and Siu asks if this place isn't too expensive. The more humble one says it's no problem to eat there. Suwu doesn't care about money anymore since he has billions in his account, and this restaurant doesn't even make a dent in his bank balance. Unfortunately, there are still the channel fees that add up to 11 billion. Playing with his phone, the boy says he will watch Gatsu while eating. Kong Ku's channel is there with 34,000 subscribers. Even for a god, the protagonist knows this is a lot. By subscribing, Su will gain an SS rank skill. But it's not for combat since it focuses on mental strength. The protagonist says that for now, he should focus on increasing his proficiency, so he starts watching the video. Inside, we observe a dense and beautiful forest with the sun illuminating everything. Kong Q says that a true knight is one who takes care of his surroundings. Sumu says he feels extreme boredom just from pressing play. The system alerts that proficiency increased by 0.01%. Later in the protagonist's room, Hercules questions why Suwu didn't gain the skill completely, and our boy says he needs to increase his proficiency. The god says this violates the laws of the world, and the power he possesses won't be able to teach her at his current level. Hercules says Suwu needs to concentrate and try to obtain the center of Kai. From the protagonist's face, it's clear he doesn't understand anything. The phone screen starts emitting a very bright light. Hercules gives Suwu a lecture because he doesn't want to understand the system, but instead wants to gain power easily. He then asks if that's wrong. Of course, our boy, slightly trembling, agrees with him. The god says he will try to teach the divine arts more simply for the protagonist to understand. The answer to learning this complex movement lies in Suwu's muscles. He says to release the force causing a headache in his own muscles. Later that night in the S group, someone says they heard Han bought new equipment. She confirms this information to her grandfather. He says it costs 4 billion, but Han promptly says the weapon is good, but nothing compared to her sword. Still, it's great auxiliary equipment and increases her stats. Taizan says it's good to hear that. She thanks her grandfather for the money invested. With a serious expression, Taizan says it will begin. The girl understands he is talking about the S-rank dungeon. A beautiful sunset is seen. On the ground, we see a tired, sedentary boy saying he still hasn't fully learned the divine arts. Su picks up his phone to take a look. There he sees that his proficiency hasn't even increased yet. A person in yellow asks if it's possible to win an impossible fight, and Kong Q responds yes. Our boy gets up even though he's so tired. In his thoughts, Su knows that in Greek history, Hercules was once human but managed to surpass the gods. The protagonist knows that the divine arts aren't just for fighting. At this moment, what he needs is endless effort. An intense wind arrives and sweeps around. With calm and concentration, our boy throws a punch that causes pressure in the environment. The system alerts that it will permeate Su's body. When he opens his eyes, he is quite surprised, because he saw the destruction his punch caused. The proficiency of the divine arts increases by 0.03%, and Su says he needs to find a new training center. Park, our favorite editor, is sighing in relief. Looking at the message, she sees that what she will eat it won't be another of the protagonist's crazy antics. The fire witch broke the record Su had set days ago, a feat that lasted an average of 11 seconds. Probably this video will be of our boy breaking that record. This time his cosplay is like the witch who surpassed him. Looking at the phone, he talks about his record being broken by the fire with channel. At this moment, Su is teasing the witch, and meanwhile, Park is in disbelief. The protagonist says something about defeating her, but if he tries, he will surely become toast. Preparing, our beloved sedentary boy plans a strategy to break the record of Hannah, the owner of the fire with channel. Su says he will stop the chatter because the real deal is about to start. Suddenly, he lifts his foot and quickly directs it to the ground. Behind the screen, a girl is scared. When she sees that the protagonist sent 2 videos, at the same moment she watches the second one, she is terrified. Returning to the moment when he lifted his foot with a sudden stomp, he makes his camera and everything around him shake. The ground starts to crack after this strike. Hart questions what she's seeing. She checks the video duration to see if the protagonist broke the record. When she sees it, she realizes Su destroyed the dungeon in just 4 seconds. With our boy, he says it was all thanks to the divine arts. And with this, having 15 million subscribers won't be a dream. Scrolling the screen, Su sees that Han failed in the dungeon, but realizes it's just rumors. Someone says they checked the articles and are absolutely sure they are real. Of course, the protagonist is impressed by this information. News reports say Han failed in the S-rank dungeon and question the future of the S group after this failure. Seeing the article, Su notices that nowhere does it explain how she lost. Even with this happening, our boy says it has nothing to do with him. A door opens, revealing the top floor of the S group building. We see Han standing there. With a somewhat angry face, she says hello. We observe that she is talking to the director of the S group and Han's aunt. Mina asks if she is returning there after meeting with President. Han says the woman is also there to see him. She says the president wants to hold an executive meeting because investments are being withdrawn and stocks are falling. Mina says that it's not Han's fault, but theirs for expecting too much. Passing by Han, the girl asks her to leave before meeting her brothers. Unfortunately, our favorite waifu is devastated. At the hospital, Su is giving medicine to his brother and she says is very bitter. The protagonist has been giving him a lot of medicine lately, and because of this, his proficiency in divine medicine is constantly increasing. Our boy is getting much stronger. The S+ rank trait Insight has a proficiency of 248%. Even though the medicine is horrible, Sue is getting better. It's definitely effective, and when his proficiency increases more, he will be able to cure this cursed disease. The problem now is money. His 17 billion won't be enough to pay the fees. Sue says he could sell medical products, but he needs certification for that. Anyway, he will just ask Kim what to do. Someone knocks on the door of the room. The person outside asks if this is the residence of Mang Suu. The guy says he is the secretary of Han Sharon. His name is Kang Minja. Inside the room, he says that the lady needs the protagonist's help to conquer the dungeon. Sue understands Han's situation. Our boy asks if she wants him to create a strategy, and Kang says yes. Sue asks what happened inside the dungeon for her to have failed. The guy says he doesn't know the details and adds that he was only informed that Han needs the protagonist's help. She wanted to come personally, but there were too many people watching her. Kang asks if Sue can talk to Han. In the Estige Group Gymnasium, we see that the girl is using the gauntlets with a certain dexterity and skill. Her strikes are precise and beautiful. Kang says he will call her, but the protagonist interrupts him, telling him to wait. In his thoughts, Sue knows that Han is in a trance training since he had previously experienced that. The secretary tries to say something, but our boy tells him to wait a bit. The girl's concentration is at an insane level, making her sweat a lot. Sue says her movements and attacks are not systematic. He adds that because of the divine arts and insight, his perception has changed, and what Han is doing now is just swinging the sword randomly. Our boy continues, saying her talent with the sword is buried because of her cruelty. But if she learns proper martial arts, she will become a great swordswoman. Or maybe join a sect, but unfortunately, the S group won't allow that. With her current level, she might be able to follow the videos on GodTube, and the channel of King Arthur, the legendary Knight of the Round Table, might help her. The first dragon slayer, Siegfried, who wields Balmung, is also a great option. Shang Yu, the 10,000 conquering man, also seemed like a good choice. Our hero thinks that Han Sharon could learn from the gods despite their odd content, but he then remembered that he was the only one with access to GodTube. Then suddenly, the idea of teaching her himself after watching the videos struck him. Since she, SH Groot's granddaughter, would be covering all the expenses, the additional members' fees wouldn't be a problem, and the greedy man could even get paid to educate her. Just thinking about the profit that this genius plan would make him made our hero drool. But the real question was whether Han Sharon would accept lessons from a hunter from a far lower class than hers. He then wondered if he could teach her the divine arts while being a mere student himself. But while the influencer was lost in his thoughts, the girl had already finished her training and stated that her assistant should have warned her of the presence of a guest. The assistant apologized to his mistress since it was Sue who asked him not to interrupt her training. Despite being all sweaty, the beautiful girl was sparkling under the light. This sight captured the blushing young man's heart. As the blushing Han Sharon passed by him, our hero couldn't help but admire her beauty. After that, inside the office, Sue claimed that he came here because Han Sharon needed his assistance. He then asked about her last mission inside the dungeon. But Sue was confused when Han Sharon claimed that the dungeon wasn't filled with monsters. The girl affirmed that she didn't find any monsters upon entering the dungeon with her team, but something big happened shortly after. The hunters stumbled upon a particular monster. Han Sharon was scared by the wolf-like creature they found in the dungeon, which could hardly be defined as a monster. The wolf family monsters were quite diverse, yet none of them should be strong enough to spawn inside an S-rank dungeon. The A-rank hunter began to shiver as she remembered how powerless she was in the face of this wolf. Despite the dungeon being S-rank, she shouldn't have been this powerless. But the real problem was that Han Sharon went to raid the dungeon with other elite hunters with great equipment, yet they stumbled upon a monster that could overpower them with ease. In short, only one monster roamed the dungeon, yet not even the A-rank hunter and her team could fight it. The rank of a dungeon depends on how much mana dwells inside it, and in this case, only one monster, who was far stronger than Han Sharon, inhabited it. It was quite a rare phenomenon where only one entity determined the rank of a dungeon. Our heroes seemed worried, as this could only mean that they were facing a mutation. One of these mutations was the Capo monster that possessed all the dungeon's mana, which explained why an A-rank hunter and her team were left powerless in the face of the beast. Sue informed the lady that the wolf in question might be a boss of all bosses monster who turned out to be an S-rank, making him more lethal than he already was. Han Sharon was shocked by this news since she wasn't familiar with the concept of a Capo monster. Sue recommended never returning to the dungeon unless the girl had a good reason to do so. She claimed to have. The problem was that the failed raid didn't just affect Han Sharon. This incident affected the whole Edge group, making them lose a great amount of money and endangering the company's stocks. The A-rank hunter wanted to and had to atone for her failure since retrieving such a lost fortune was worth risking one's life. Since they were about to fight an undiscovered S-rank Capo monster, Sue had one request. The influencer wanted to make a YouTube video out of their raid. He then proceeded to ask the shocked girl for a 10 billion payment. Sue claimed that he wouldn't settle for anything less. After that, our hero began to regret not asking for a bigger sum, seeing how the pretty girl quickly agreed with a 1 billion deposit in advance. Yet he decided to restrain his greed as 10 billion was already a cherishable sum. Our hero couldn't ask for a higher payment since he had to come up with a plan to defeat a brand new type of monster that was completely alien to him, which could be difficult to realize. But he then remembered that his insight was already at 24%, which made him more determined than before to analyze the capo monster. One day later, Sue arrived at the dungeon along with Han Sharon. The A-rank hunter allowed the influencer to analyze the wolf and its habitat on the condition that she come with him. Our hero didn't want to enter the dungeon, but he was obligated to in order to gather data about the capo monster. He was reassured by his super strength and his divine combat arts, which guaranteed his survival but not his victory. The aura in an S-rank dungeon was far more menacing than the one inside a regular one. Han Sharon then proposed to go further in the dungeon. On the way, Sue noticed that the girl wasn't feeling comfortable in her gauntlets. He then asked her if the gauntlets were not a perfect fit for her, which she confirmed they weren't. Han Sharon was then confused when the boy proposed to make them more comfortable. Sue crafted these gauntlets to fit his measurements, which explains why they didn't fit the lady. The gauntlets began to shrink. Our generous protagonist decided not to charge the lady for adjusting her gloves. Han Sharon was shocked to discover that Sue was the blacksmith behind these elite gauntlets, which explains why he was so familiar with them. She was even more surprised to discover that he was the mysterious prodigy that even Master Siu Pao Wang acknowledged. The lovely conversation was suddenly interrupted by a fierce roar. Sue was left in complete shock. Both of the hunters could feel a massive energy in the air, but he then turned to his right and couldn't believe his own eyes. The murderous red gaze of the S-rank capo monster was upon them. This wolf was filled with power. The creature was like none before. Sue began to panic as the wolf's power was like nothing he had ever seen before. The terrifying S-rank capo monster had arrived, and so the influencer and his client came face to face with the mighty wolf. The panicked Sue began to wonder if the two of them were capable of defeating this new kind of monster, but he then remembered that he only came to scalp the monster and not face it. And so the YouTuber activated his power as he was determined not to engage. With that, our hero made his move. He then proceeded to smash the ground with his foot, before telling Han Sharon to retreat. And just like that, the two of them began to run for their lives. The capo monster's howling echoed throughout the dungeon. Sue and Han Sharon made it safe and sound out of the dungeon. Although he couldn't be fully sure of it, the strategist speculated that they would need at least 5 S-rank hunters to even neutralize the giant wolf. Han Sharon wanted to know about the ability that Sue used to escape the dungeon. But the man was more interested in knowing how her team didn't suffer any casualties after facing such a horrific beast. Han Sharon claimed that they were only fortunate, so Sue asked her if she was still sure about facing the capo monster once again. But the girl was more determined than ever to go back inside the dungeon. She only needed the YouTuber to come up with a plan for her team in order to finally defeat the beast. Both looked into the eyes of the other in silence. With that, Sue took his leave, stating that he would call Han Sharon once the monster was analyzed. The footage of the capo monster was getting replayed. Sue couldn't figure out the nature of the wolf, but he was certain that it originally evolved from a normal monster like all the other capo monsters. Our hero couldn't find the slightest information despite searching through the internet, the association's papers, and even the monster encyclopedia. Even after using his elite skill insight, he was still left in the dark. With that, the strategist decided to suspend his research until tomorrow. After completing Hercules' exercises, our hero was able to enhance his super strength and slightly perfect his knowledge of the divine arts, but was left completely exhausted afterward. Hercules was disappointed to see his subscribers so tired after what he considered light exercises. Sue began to look at his phone. The curious god wanted to know what the man was focused on. Our hero was still trying to figure out what the wolf truly was. Hercules was surprised to know that his subscriber was, in fact, a strategist. He decided to watch the footage of the monster in question. Hercules seemed surprised. Sue asked the god if he had ever encountered such a wolf before. Our hero was surprised when Hercules recognized the wolf as Fenrir. Fenrir, who was also known as the Wolf of Divine Slaughter, was a fierce beast of Norse mythology who earned his title for a simple reason. This beast was, in fact, the monster that ended the apocalypse known as Ragnarok. With his powerful jaws touching both heaven and earth, Fenrir, who devours everything in his path, was able to slay Odin, the strongest god of Norse mythology. Confused, Sue asked Hercules about the divine beast's presence in the human realm, but Hercules was just as confused. Our hero began to relate the Wolf of Divine Slaughter to a mysterious man that gave him access to Gachu. This made him think that Hercules was, in fact, the only god who didn't know how to enter the human realm. It turns out that the god too faced the capo monster once and emerged victorious. Sue then asked about the outcome of his eventual fight with Fenrir. But our hero was confused when Hercules declared that the fight would last 1 second. The man was annoyed by the god who thinks that a giant wolf would slay him in such a short time. But Fenrir seemed a little bit weird to Hercules as he looked more like a baby wolf now who lost most of his strength. Sue was surprised since the gigantic beast was, in fact, a puppy. Yet he's still a fierce monster of Norse mythology. The capo monster was also wearing an ornament that the god was unfamiliar with. Hercules pointed at a particular point on the screen. Fenrir's power was limited by a crimson chain around his leg. Curious, the hunter asked about this ornament. The shackle was Gleitner, an artifact that was deemed indestructible. Hercules then started to joke about how it would take a whole minute for the baby Fenrir to annihilate his subscriber. But just as our hero was lost in his thoughts about the wolf of divine slaughter, the god proposed to reveal the beast's weaknesses. The playful Hercules was hesitant to do so, so Sybil proposed to reveal a secret that would earn him 200 subscribers in exchange for the intel. With that, Hercules rushed everything he needed to fill his part of the contract. After some time in the dungeon area near the Estia office building, the journalist began to bombard the huntress with questions, but she ignored everyone and she made her way to the gate. The door opened up. With a team of elite hunters assembled, Han Charon decided to head into the dungeon. But some of the hunters were confused as Sue began to stream right before the big moment, which made them wonder who he might be. One of them recognized him as a YouTuber. Sue's channel, World Conquering Man *, wasn't really well known, as the man was confused as to why an influencer was coming along. The short hunter found it foolish when he discovered that the YouTuber was, in fact, the strategist behind the plan to take down the Capo monster. Sue's presence, along with the exaggerated support provided for the party members, mean Han Charon looked desperate in front of the hunter. The tall one wanted to converse with Sumbanim, but he quickly shunned him off as they were about to enter Fenrir's territory. And so Sue, along with Han Charon and an impressive group of hunters, entered the S-class dungeon. Our hero kept streaming despite the tense atmosphere. This performance annoyed Sumbanim as Sue was filming a video right before facing the great wolf, which made him worry that the beast would locate them. Suddenly, his anger turned into fear and astonishment. The humans were terrified as they came face to face with the wolf of divine slaughter. Seeing this, Han Charon began to question her decision, thinking that she should have sought the aid of the S-class hunters and feared that people would die because of her stubbornness. But then the huntress decided to carry on without the help of the S-rank, as this was the first raid of the S group, meaning that this was their fight alone. Han Charon wanted the world to know how powerful the S group really is. But the lady was shocked when Sue called the Capo monster Fenrir, the monster of Norse mythology, in front of the camera. He then pointed out that the watchers must have their doubts about the wolf's identity. The influencer claimed to have doubts himself, and so our hero decided to fight the terrible beast to see if it's really the one and only Fenrir. He claims it to be his duty to find out as the World Conquering Man *. Sue then stated that the task would be easy for him regardless of the wolf being Fenrir or not. Our hero then turned to Han Charon to see if she was prepared for the battle, and so Sue decided to use his first plan to take the wolf of divine slaughter down. With that, our hero made a powerful jump. Han Charon seemed shocked. Sue was able to close the distance between him and the wolf in a flash. Fenrir immediately attacked with his paw, quickly smashing the ground. But to the A-rank huntress's surprise, the influencer was nowhere to be found. Sue managed to sneak his way onto Fenrir's head and decided to hit with all his strength. With that, the hunter got the first hit on the wolf. His energy was so powerful that the other hunters had a hard time staying on their feet. A dark energy roamed the dungeon. The wolf of divine slaughter was left unscratched by the powerful punch. Sue was surprised at the poor results of his first plan. This left him unsatisfied since Hercules promised good results upon following his tactic. Sue started to dodge the Capo monster's attacks. This fight led to multiple explosions emerging throughout the dungeon. Our hero had a hard time keeping up with the quick Fenrir. Han Charon decided to join the battle along with her team, and so the huntress charged forward. Sue was startled. He escaped a deadly blow from the great beast at the last moment. The struggling hero was now sure that the beast in front of him was the one and true Fenrir. Sue then remembered how Hercules claimed that he would lose in a minute, but he then realized how strong Fenrir was, which explains why Hercules was the only one to beat him. The wolf of divine slaughter was a real powerhouse, yet there was still hope, because as long as he was slowed down by Gleitner, beating him wasn't out of reach. Yet it was a major problem that Sue couldn't harm him. A blue flash flew across the dungeon. Thankfully, Sue wasn't facing the wolf alone as Han Charon managed to get a clean slash on Fenrir's face. The huntress joined the fight, but her attack angered the Capo monster, when suddenly a huge fire appeared behind him. Flame Orb was about to be cast, which meant that Han Charon had magic-type hunters in her ranks, and so the hunters launched the fireball, hitting Fenrir on the back of his head. But Odin's Slayer was still unscratched as he howled through the flames. The hunters decided to use Flame Orb once again, but Fenrir was able to counter the spell with his powerful jaws. The hunters were shocked and terrified after witnessing the Capo monster swallow in Flame Orb with ease. Despite all their efforts, the Capo monster was still unharmed. But the hunters decided to stand their ground despite the odds, preparing to face Fenrir. Soon pointed out to Han Charon that the wolf was bound by Gleitner. Assaulting the wolf of divine slaughter would become possible if they could use the shackles to immobilize him. The huntress nodded as a sign of understanding, and so she began to move. Han Charon attacked the wolf head-on. Meanwhile, Sue began to concentrate on enhancing his senses while keeping a cool head. The blue power emerged once again. Fenrir was distracted by Han Charon and the rest of her team, so he didn't notice Sue's surprise attack from the back. Seeing this, Fenrir tried to smash her hero into the ground, but Su fortunately dodged the wolf's claws and managed to gain the upper hand. Super strength was activated, and so Su punched Fenrir with the power of the mighty Hercules. Super strength turned out to be effective. With that, Su decided to unleash a barrage of punches on the wolf, yet our hero seemed startled. It all happened so fast. Su was knocked back as he started to bleed from his chest. He almost met his end, and if it weren't for his good reflexes, Su would have been butchered. When suddenly, the hunters seemed to have realized something. It looked like Fenrir had a moment of hesitation before trying to strike the protagonist down. Han-Sharon was able to wound the beast with her blade. She was determined to take the capo monster down, but Su was confused as to why the terrifying Fenrir was holding back. The wolf growled in pain. He was finally wounded. So Su decided to concentrate on the fight and seize the opportunity in front of him. With that, he charged at the beast and quickly closed the distance between him and the capo monster before punching the beast with all his strength. The wolf felt deep pain upon getting hit. Fenrir decided to smash the young man under his paw, giving him the perfect opportunity. Su firmly gripped the crimson chain. Fenrir realized what the hunters were trying to do. The wolf found himself immobilized by Su, who was struggling to keep hold of the chain. The enraged beast tried to fight back, so our hero decided to use every ounce of strength in his body to keep him restrained. Fenrir found himself getting pulled by Su. Han-Sharon charged in to help the newtuber. Su was getting ready to deliver a powerful punch. Fenrir was now between two powerful fire powers and had to suffer a devastating slash along with a powerful punch. The hunters had a hard time believing their eyes. A massive hole appeared on the dungeon's floor. The victorious Han-Sharon was exhausted, but that wasn't the end of it yet. Su was thrown into the air. The hunters began to shake in fear. The dark aura appeared. Fenrir was still standing despite his injuries. Sunben then realized that they couldn't win against the wolf of divine slaughter. Fenrir looked more demonic than ever, yet Su was still confused. He was intrigued because the great beast was clearly weakened by his shackles. That this beast is still the almighty Fenrir and Odin's killer, so our hero had no chance of defeating him, yet the situation was still odd. As Han-Sharon ordered everyone to retreat after picking him up, he remembered the Black Troll dungeon and how she might have saved her team last time in the same way. Su was intrigued by their inability to defeat the wolf no matter how much they tried. When suddenly, he realized it all. Su finally understood the situation. He felt like an idiot as it was illogical from the start. Our hero suddenly began to run. Han-Sharon was trying to repel the mighty wolf. She had a hard time keeping up with the wolf, when suddenly, the influencer stood between her and the beast. Fenrir wasn't trying to harm the protagonist but only gazed at him. Han-Sharon was shocked by this sudden craziness. Her voice seemed blurry and far away as he stared at Fenrir. Sumo claimed that the situation lacked sense from the start. It was meaningless for the party to engage with the wolf from the start. Su found it bizarre that he was still alive. He also wondered how all of his allies managed to keep their lives, and how they were all still breathing after fighting such a beast for so long. Han-Sharon demanded an explanation, yet the protagonist claimed it to be obvious. If Fenrir sought their destruction, none of the hunters would have left the dungeon with their lives. But Sunbae wanted to know why they weren't dead, if that was the case. Fenrir spared their lives, which explains why Han-Sharon and her team didn't suffer any casualties the first time they fought him. The wolf wanted to keep the humans away from him in order to keep them safe. Even Su had a hard time believing what he was saying, but they were always the ones to draw the first attack, and it would be senseless if Fenrir was truly a mindless beast. Fenrir, who was abandoned at birth and struggling to survive alone, was to be Asgard's doom, but he survived this life out of sheer will. The gods of Asgard came to see Fenrir with a rope and challenged him to untie it. The lonely puppy didn't doubt the Asgardians because for him, this looked more like a game with new friends. The gods were surprised to see that the cub was able to cut a rope that even Thor couldn't destroy. Fenrir was overjoyed as he felt that he finally gained friends, but the Asgardians didn't share that feeling. Fearing that this wolf would grow up to be their doom, they created Gleipnir in order to seal his powers for eternity, which made Fenrir grow suspicious of his new friends. Tyr, the god of war, came to the little furball and swore that Fenrir could chew his arm off in case the gods refused to unchain him if he failed to break free from them himself. The cub believed the god of war as he was the only one who stayed with him, when all the other gods abandoned him and even fed him in this barren land like a true friend. And just like that, Fenrir was shackled with Gleipnir and found himself unable to break free. Naturally, the Asgardians didn't help him and even the god of war started to ignore him. But Tyr did respect his oath and put his left arm inside the beast's mouth. The Asgardian confessed that he betrayed Fenrir, yet the divine wolf couldn't bring himself to dismember his friend. Yet those who feared Fenrir's strength decided to seal his mouth with a knife, making it unable to close. The wolf of divine slaughter remained sealed until Ragnarok arrived. Fenrir was still a lonely wolf living in agony. But when the apocalypse arrived, Ragnarok's madness swallowed the divine wolf, who then laid waste to the world and butchered all the gods. That even in his madness, Fenrir couldn't bring himself to harm the god of war. Even in this moment of bloodlust, he still hadn't forgotten. That turtle was the only one that remained by his side and fed him when all the others left. The naive and innocent wolf could only see him as a friend. The wolf of divine slaughter in Norse mythology was wrongly called a demonic wolf. Soon affirmed that Fenrir refused to harm them, but the hunters had a hard time believing that the beast wasn't the enemy. Han-Charon claimed that they had to slay him regardless of the circumstances. It would be a disaster if the S-rank dungeon they left open had a dungeon break, and even if it didn't occur but Fenrir managed to escape in the dungeon shock, there was no guarantee that civilians would be left unharmed. Han-Charon decided to retreat and ask an S-rank party to assist her. With that, she decided to give up on conquering the dungeon. The huntress was right, as disposing of the wolf was a must in order to avoid any future disaster. Still, we didn't know the reason behind the beast's presence on Earth. Our hero speculated that the wolf might have been left behind once again. During Ragnarok, Fenrir was freed from his shackles. Akira is mysteriously chained again, meaning that he was abandoned, and this dungeon serves as his eternal prison. And just like the legend, Fenrir was fated to die alone after being abandoned at birth. This also explained why this dungeon was labeled S-rank, as the mana measured belonged to the prison itself and not to the prisoner. The mana needed to seal a weakened Fenrir was measured to be S-rank. Sue felt some sense of guilt when Han-Charon proposed to get out of the dungeon. Fenrir's situation was currently hopeless and Sue was unable to help him. Leaving now would seal the pacifist wolf's fate, and even if he might have already taken his own life, he let them walk away. He compared this situation that he labeled ridiculous to the legend, and he would be done with this matter once he stepped out of the dungeon. Even the wolf of divine slaughter wouldn't defeat an S-rank party, and with his weakened and sealed state, gathering enough S-rank hunters would be enough to vanquish him. Fenrir must be taken out of the picture in order to keep everyone safe. Stu thinks that abandoning the wolf would be easy, and all it would take was for him to resume his daily routine. He just had to be a YouTuber, make profit, and craft equipment while upgrading his God-2 traits in order to treat his little sister. He just had to repeat those things. Yet he couldn't get himself to exit the dungeon. Han-Charon was surprised to see Sue running in the opposite direction. Our hero made his way and stood in front of the great beast, in a saddened look on his face. Sue was troubled by Fenrir's injuries. In the end, Fenrir was just a lonely pacifist wolf who even hesitated to harm his attackers. But he was still a demonic wolf and a terrifying monster, so taking his life was the only solution. The God-tubers never gave up and were even victorious in impossible fights and never backed down even from endless battles, making them relentless fighting heroes in the end. And if it was impossible, Sue would realize it by demolishing this dungeon. This shocked Han-Charon. The problem was, in fact, the dungeon that served as a prison for the Capo monster and could be destroyed at any moment. Yet destroying a dungeon realm was a godly feat, yet not impossible. Using so much power meant taking a great risk. Yet Sue would go to the end, and just like the most noble things didn't act for themselves, gentlemen acted for the well-being of others. Our hero thinks that he is talking like a sage and couldn't help but laugh, as no one would understand his effort and he couldn't even make a profit from this situation. Yet the wisdom of the gods states that even gentlemen shouldn't give up to anger when no one realizes their efforts. In today's world, it was enough to not be called stupid. Yet for some reason, Sue wanted to be someone considered helpful to his entourage. This is the kind of ideal that the YouTuber adopted after watching Confucius on God2 for some unknown reason. That's what he started to think after seeing the injured divine beast. With that, he decided to use Hercules' divine combat arts. Even Fenrir was shocked by this. According to Hercules, the divine combat arts weren't solely for fighting, but were able to bend the world's law, like the law of space. With that, he decided to use his first technique, launching himself into the air, ready to use a powerful kick. Tremendous power flowed inside him. Sue used Asterisk Descending Dragon Kick Asterisk. This released incredible mana throughout the dungeon, burning the nearby trees. Only a blue flash could be seen in the dungeon. It was a starry night, when suddenly space began to fracture. Han-Charon witnessed the dungeon shattering. She was beyond shock and couldn't believe her eyes. Sue was now lying on the ground, so the huntress rushed to his side and found his heart beating. The northern lights filled the sky of the broken dungeon. Han-Charon seemed surprised. The wolf of divine slaughter was standing there peacefully in front of her and Sue. She looked at the injured man in silence. She was already aware that he wasn't a traitless awakener after seeing him in the Black Troll dungeon. Yet Han-Charon was unable to understand the immense power that even made an S-rank dungeon crumble. Yet now wasn't the time to give in to amazement. Han-Charon looked behind one last time. For the first time, Fenrir was calm. And just like that, she decided to exit the dungeon along with our hero before the space collapsed. Sue suddenly woke up covered in bandages. He was surprised that he wasn't dead. Our hero found himself in the SJ Hospital VIP room, which could only mean one thing. Han-Charon asked if he was feeling unwell. He was confused as to why the huntress was present, but she was getting treated as well. Han-Charon then asked if he was pleased with the room, as Sue was surely happy as he got to share a room with the beautiful huntress. He then remembered the wisdom of Confucius stating that men and women should sleep in different rooms once they reach the age of 7. But just as he realized how ridiculous his thoughts were, Han-Charon asked him if he would like to know what occurred after he collapsed. Sue explained that the A-rank huntress carried his unconscious self to the exit of the dungeon before it collapsed, and that he woke up in the hospital after lots of special care. Han Sharon was left speechless, which made the man think that the huntress liked to beat around the bush. The dungeon was considered conquered. Sue wanted to know about Fenrir, but Han Sharon wasn't sure. She just saw him going somewhere, so the protagonist hoped that the freed beast would regain the land of the gods. Han Sharon decided to keep the dungeon events a secret and even asked her party members to keep silent, as everyone thought that they were the ones to clear the dungeon. Yet the huntress had no problem revealing the truth that it was Sue who truly conquered the dungeon. But Sue wanted to keep the secret, so the surprised huntress wanted to know if he had a reason for concealing his powers. Yet our hero affirmed that he wouldn't have become a YouTuber in the first place if he wanted to keep his strength secret. Han Sharon listened closely to the hero's reasoning. He wanted the world to know that she was the one to defeat Fenrir since this victory was vital for the S group. Sumu guessed that the girl wasn't sure of her abilities and wasn't certain that she should declare herself conqueror of the dungeon. Despite not having the skills to conquer this S-rank dungeon, Sue affirmed that this one was a particular case and that Han Sharon was able to clear any dungeon ranked S. The huntress assumed that he was trying to cheer her up, but Sue affirmed that he was only stating the evident. They both looked at each other in silence before Han Sharon expressed her gratitude. But Sue wanted to close the subject and ask if she had anything else to discuss, to which the girl affirmed that she had one last question. Han Sharon wanted to work with the YouTuber. After that, in the afternoon, Sue was looking at his phone amazed. His eyes couldn't believe how high his stats became. Super strength only gained less than 0.5% each day, yet it was suddenly boosted by 13%. The divine combat arts, which had an extremely small weekly progress, were risen by an unexpected 9.3%. Also, insight and gentleman's mind increased a lot. Maybe the descending dragon kit caused it because the YouTuber had been conquering dungeons in his video up until now, but this time he destroyed the dungeon dimension itself. This ended him up injured in the hospital. And just like the Black Troll dungeon, Sue collapsed after using his full power. That the use of the divine combat arts was still a big step forward for our hero, which made him wonder when he would be able to fully master it. Sue only wanted to use it once, but Han Sharon was unexpectedly okay with it. Han Sharon asked her chauffeur to drive her to her grandfather. The man thanked the girl for beating the dungeon and stated that her grandfather was overjoyed with this feat. But her attention was caught when the driver mentioned the name of Sue. He wanted to know if the YouTuber refused to collaborate once again, which she confirmed. The driver wanted to hear the man's excuse. Han Sharon mentioned how a gentleman associates with people and not groups, and how the weak minds formed teams yet weren't harmonious, which confused the man. Which is why Sue would rather join forces with her in similar circumstances rather than become part of her team. The YouTuber also asked the huntress if she would like to learn the ways of the sword. The chauffeur assumed that the YouTuber would teach her himself despite being an awakener of a far lower rank than Han Sharon. She then affirmed that she accepted, so the driver asked about the reason behind her visit to the chairman. The man was beyond shocked when he learned that Han Sharon had to pay him in order to learn swordsmanship. Meanwhile, at the hospital, our hero was about to make a choice. King Shan used Divine Sword along with Zhang Sanfeng's Taiji Sword and Siegfried's dragon-slaying sword technique seemed like the best options for the huntress. Sue would demonstrate all three to her and let her choose whichever she liked most. Our hero would have to pay for the subscription, but money wasn't a problem because he would receive monthly tuition fees along with the 10 billion he already made. He decided to check the subscription fee of each channel. To his surprise, they all cost 200 million each. But he was more startled when he read the price right, and it became 2 billion. Subscribing to Confucius only cost 1 billion, yet these new channels were far more expensive. Someone checked some other channels that cost 100 million previously, but now they were all worth 2 billion. This meant that the more channels he was subscribed to, the more the membership fees would increase in price. He feared that it would reach an unimaginable number eventually, like 5 billion, meaning that he couldn't pick all 3 channels. And even if the price went up by only 1 billion, the overall price would be 9 billion. So he had the idea to cancel the membership after signing up, but what if it weren't possible? In other words, he would have to pay such a price monthly, but it would be automatically canceled if he didn't pay up, and even if he could only teach the huntress one sword technique, the membership fee of the next channel would have increased by then. The situation seemed hopeless no matter how much wealth he accumulated, when suddenly, our hero noticed something. He felt something that wasn't human nearby. Sue decided to go and take a look. Our hero found the small dog. This intrigued the man. The dog seemed happy from his wagging tail. This cute puppy was none other than the wolf of divine slaughter. Sue was surprised to see Fenrir here. Fenrir had become smaller and younger. Intrigued, he went down on his knees. Fenrir dropped a mouse out of his mouth. The confused hero assumed that Fenrir was bringing him food. But to his surprise, the mouse was still breathing. With that, the wolf of divine slaughter left in a rush. Sue couldn't believe what just happened. Hercules was angry at his subscriber who spared Fenrir, unlike what he taught him. But our hero denied Hercules doing such a thing. Neither of the gods' tactics to pull the beast's tail or attack him from the sides was effective. Still, Hercules blamed Su's own weakness for it, so our hero claimed that the godtuber should have warned him in the first place. Su almost lost his life back then due to Hercules overestimating him. Our hero claimed that this time didn't count since he asked Hercules for an adequate plan for his level, yet he only gave him his methods. The god claimed that every muscle in his body found it unjust. Stu's good luck greatly helped him escape this dungeon alive, but that wasn't the most crucial point. Our hero no longer possessed the footage of the raid that would have made great views since it featured Han Charon and Fenrir. This video would have been of great help to our hero, but it was now gone to waste. Stu then heard barking, meaning that he came back. The little Fenrir was shivering. This made the newtuber look at the godtuber. Hercules then turned around to see the little puppy dashing out of the room. Fenrir must not trust Hercules since they fought before. This time, Fenrir brought a pigeon, which made the hero even more confused. He then patted the pigeon and asked it to get back on its feet. Just like that, the pigeon woke up startled. It started to look around the room. When its gaze met Su's eyes, it flew out of the window, which even intrigued the god about the bird and the wolf. Su speculated that Fenrir might have brought it as a treat for him. But this odd cat-like behavior shouldn't be present in a dog. Hercules speculated that Fenrir was bringing him what he hunted, yet Su stated that the puppy had no intention of hurting other animals. Maybe Fenrir wanted Su to finish them off himself, but nothing was certain. Hercules then asked the reason for Fenrir being present in Su's house and why he was hunting for him. And so our hero told Hercules about the dungeon incident that led them to this exact moment. But Hercules was more interested in knowing how Fenrir got to the human world. Su affirmed that he had been asking the same question for a while and claimed that Hercules must be the only god that didn't know how to cross to the human world. But the godtuber assured that it was impossible to get from his world to the mortal realm, yet Fenrir managed to cross. Hercules began to cry when he saw that Su was now sure he was the only god who didn't know how to. The lionhead then claimed that even his muscles found it unjust, but Su had just ignored him. Hercules changed the topic and asked Su about his ability to use the descending dragon kick so early. Our hero thinks that it was due to his fortune. Hercules claimed that luck wasn't enough to perform such an advanced technique. The musclehead then agreed to teach the man his next technique. But first, Su had to fulfill his end of the bargain and give Hercules a good video idea. Hercules was happy with his subscriber's idea. Meanwhile, somewhere else in an unknown location, the scared man was just informed that a commission for our D-rank protagonist just came in. He then slapped his glass on the table, asking the two girls to give him some privacy. They immediately headed out without uttering a single word. The smiling scared man asked if he was a D-rank. The other one confirmed, which made the first one think it's a joke. Miao Jigwang, several-level executive of Pandemonium, the #1 criminal organization and the most wanted worldwide, wanted to know if this individual was mocking their organization. Yet the masked man assured that Su was no ordinary D-class, but Miao Jigwang didn't believe it. He claimed that Su was involved in Han Charon's successful raid of the S-rank dungeon that everyone knew about. This surprised Miao Jigwang as he was only a D-class hunter. It seemed like Su assisted the huntress, and the several-level executive's job was to confirm the commission in any way he liked. But Miao Jigwang decided to back down when he learned that the commission was from a VIP. The masked man was surprised when the executive stated that Li Minjum, also known as the human butcher of the Inspection Bureau, made her move. She was causing them problems, but the masked man was still surprised to see a Pandemonium officer fearing a guard of the Inspection Bureau. Miao Jigwang affirmed that even he wouldn't escape unharmed from her, and he also wanted to avoid any unnecessary problems with a new branch manager in Korea. The masked man was shocked to hear this and immediately guessed that a SCAR-level officer was appointed. The heart of the Pandemonium known as executives were divided into 5 levels: Sever, Fracture, Rupture, Scar, and Bruise, and their mysterious leader Red Shadow murdered one of the 13 heroes. A SCAR-level executive referred to someone that could work with the Red Shadow and survive, only being scarred. The masked man was terrified by this news, but Miao Jigwang advised him not to spread the word. The sever-level executive poured himself a glass, and the masked man watched in silence as Miao Jigwang drank his whiskey before proposing to help with the Inspection Bureau. This caught Miao Jigwang's attention as the man also claimed that he would assist the organization in organizing itself in Korea, helping the new branch manager with his new position and helping Miao Jigwang to get on his good side. With that, Miao Jigwang was sure that Su was someone very important and asked about the rules of the commission, so the masked man asked to keep him alive. The violent executive then asked if it was allowed to dismember him. Training while being injured slowed down Su's progression. But just as he thought about how glad he was of his ability to progress, a small black shadow appeared. A knockout rabbit was now near our hero. This made him wonder if the wolf ventured to the mountains. And curious about how the little puppy brought the animal to the city. Fenrir had been bringing hunted prey for some time now, so Su assumed that he would soon cease to. But the next day, the little dog offered him a whole deer. He then found a knockout eagle the day after. This made our hero curious about the little Fenrir. hunting such big prey and jokingly thought that he would bring him a bear next. A new day was upon our hero. He opened his door to find something huge and brown. Ironically, and to his surprise, Fenrir did bring him an actual bear. He looked in silence at the wolf of divine slaughter, who hoped his gift would be appreciated. With that, Sue decided to find a solution. After a week of recovery, our hero arrived home. He was greeted by his little sister, who came to check on him. Sue decided to lie and affirm that it was only a light injury. But our hero was more concerned in knowing if his sister was following the treatment while he was gone this time, so the pouting Siuha affirmed she didn't. Sue asked if she was keeping up her herbal medicine, but she claimed that she would barf just by thinking about them. He then decided to increase his healing capabilities to make it easier for his sister, but it seemed that he had something to ask her. Her Abba asked her about a puppy, which intrigued the little girl before hearing the sound of one inside the house. But before he could explain, his sister was already amazed. Siu was amazed by the little furbal's cuteness, but her brother advised her to be wary. He claimed that he might bite her. Sue remembers what a horrifying monster beast Fenrir really is when his. But just as he was about to tell Sue that this dog was named Fenrir, he noticed the demonic furball looking at him, so he agreed to let his sister name their new puppy. With that, the wolf of divine slaughter was given the name Hupdori since he looked like a black stone. Sue looked at Fenrir and his dark aura while thinking about how terrible his sister was at naming. From the looks of it, the puppy loved his new given name. Sue was shocked to see Fenrir liking his new name, thinking that the knave puppy must already know how to survive in this human world. Both the dog and the girl were happy. This put a genuine smile on our hero's face. And just like that, Fenrir was now known as Hupdori. After that, in the lowest floor of the SA Hunters Guild headquarters that served as the training hall, someone apologized for making the other wait. Han Sharon wanted to settle her side of the contract first and wire the rest of the promised $10 billion to the YouTuber. Sumu then confirmed the transfer after seeing the $9 billion deposit in his account. With that, his net worth was now $10.6 billion. Our greedy hero did his best to hide his overflowing joy, as this sum would suffice a family for generations. Han Sharon wanted to negotiate the tuition fee after seeing how her future mentor wields a sword. He then asked her to see for herself and choose a style, which was fortunate for him as he didn't know how much to ask in exchange for his services. With that, Sue asked the huntress for a practice sword. Han Sharon had to choose between 3 different sword styles. This intrigued the huntress, but Sue affirmed that he selected the most suited for her, yet it was hard to choose one over the others. Since the membership for the 3 channels would have been too expensive for our hero, he was wondering if he could demonstrate the techniques well after just witnessing the trailers. The first style was called Sky-Breaking Divine Sword that could cut through heaven. Sue firmly planted his feet into the ground. An immense blue aura emerged from the sword from a simple swing. Han Sharon was amazed as she couldn't see the motion of the blade. The sword was still moving. Sue was going for another swing. This created a powerful shockwave inside the training hall. Han Sharon was immobilized when her tutor swung it slowly, and the pressure was close to making her bend the knee. Sue would now demonstrate the Dragon Slayer swordsmanship that was practiced by the first dragon killer, surpassing Siegfried's in combat. Our hero called upon his blue mana once again. This style demanded concentration. A pink energy dragon came out of the sword. This worm made Han Sharon shiver. The third technique was known as the Tadmuk sword, which was used by the founder of Wudang, Zhang Sanlong, whose sword is said to hold the secret of the universe's beginning. Han Sharon was even more shocked when an immense yin-yang sign appeared beneath their feet. This time, the 4 elements of nature were being emitted from the blade. Before a dark aura began to come out, Sue's swing looked like a moving shadow. This display of power left Han Sharon petrified by fear. With that, Sue asked the huntress which technique she would like to be taught. Meanwhile, a black car was parked in front of the SH Hunter Guild headquarters with someone waiting for our heroes inside. The driver affirmed that he wasn't sure, leaving the person in the back intrigued. The several-level executive was joking about Sue and Han Sharon being in a relationship in which he can't satisfy her. He then thought for a moment, before mentioning Siua, with a mischievous look on his face. The driver claimed that they shouldn't get more people involved as it risks attracting the Inspection Bureau's butcher, yet the redhead decided to ignore it. He claimed that the council would handle the rest and that they should mistreat Sue's sister. That way, the angry brother would come on his own to them. With that, the driver was tasked with kidnapping Siua. Meanwhile, inside the SJ Hunter Guild, Han Sharon was still petrified by the shock upon witnessing the 3 techniques. She then came back to her senses to Sue, asking her to select one of the 3 sword styles, yet she seemed hesitant. So someone decided to hand her the sword in order for her to try performing the techniques. Still hesitant but fully concentrated, Han Sharon was going to try it for herself. She tried her best yet couldn't replicate what she'd seen. According to Sue, the huntress lacked something despite executing the movements to perfection. Han Sharon noticed that she lacked something. Since Sue was desperate to get paid, he proposed trying other styles with a smile on his face. After that, in the bus, Hercules affirmed that the huntress wouldn't be able to learn his techniques as she was still immortal. Yet Suwu mumbled that he can learn from the gods, but Hercules claimed that it's due to him harnessing their divine powers, which left the mortal intrigued. Hercules then asked him if he remembered why he refused to pass him the divine combat arts when he first asked for them. Suwu recalled the musclehead calling it pain, but Hercules denied it. Back then, the god claimed that his fighting style was reserved for those who possess super strength, and also that Suwu wasn't right in the head. According to Hercules, one needs the basics in order to learn the fighting styles of the gods like Suwu, the divine combat arts. Han Sharon couldn't repeat the moves because she didn't have the basics, but that she could see them was impressive, making Suwu think that he learned from Datu. But Hercules denied it. The musclehead recalled that his subscriber awakened Traitless, which intrigued Suwu. Hercules speculated that Traitless was a trait itself, as Suwu couldn't possibly acquire divine powers just by subscribing to some channels on Datu. In other words, one couldn't reform an existence as it is, and traits function the same way, so trying to recreate a trait would be no different from someone rejecting his very essence. But Suwu wasn't unique and was like a completely blank paper, making him able to learn the powers of the gods as he pleases. Hercules speculated that being traitless allowed him to use Datu, so our hero theorized that he was the only one who used the abilities displayed on it. This made our greedy influencer sad, as it meant that he wouldn't get his huge pension from the huntress, since he was unable to teach her. So Hercules stated that Suwu should teach her his own style no matter how insignificant it would be. Meanwhile, Myung Ji-wan's driver was now in front of Suwu's house. He reached for the handle and easily snatched it from the door. With that, the man broke into the protagonist's house. He was now above the sleeping Seo and couldn't help but notice her beauty. Since the goal was to provoke her brother, the goon assumed that he could exercise his bad intentions on her. He was troubled as there was someone else in the house despite not feeling a presence. The mighty furball entered the room. Back to the bus, Hercules claimed that it shouldn't matter if he can't teach her from Datu, as mortals couldn't do it. Sumu could still try to teach her what he gained from Datu, but it would still be useless as Han Charon was unable to harness divine powers. So Sumu could still be a teacher, but the huntress wouldn't be a new student. But Hercules pointed out that it would be a different matter if he selected Master Zhang Sanfeng's Taiji. This technique was so crucial in martial arts that even Hercules used it as inspiration when creating his own fighting style, and maybe the protagonist could do the same after subscribing. With that, Su would be able to use the divine martial arts that couldn't be used by humans, create his own that wouldn't be godly, and then teach them to the huntress. Our hero speculated that he would get better at the divine martial arts once he learned Taiji, which Hercules confirmed with a loud voice. Su started to think as it was a formidable task to create his own martial art, yet that was the best solution. With that, our hero thanked Hercules, who seemed to have something on his mind. The Godtuber wanted to know when Su would reveal the new content idea that he promised. The influencer claimed that he would give him the idea once this matter was settled, as the concept was complex. Hercules agreed, and with that, our hero exited the bus. On the way, Su thought of how difficult it is to create a fighting style or even to learn the divine combat arts, making him wonder how he would teach the huntress Taiji-based martial arts. But then our hero saw his door handle on the floor, and incredible anger started to dwell inside him as he understood what happened here. And with that, he rushed to his little sister, Seo, who was quietly sleeping in her bed. Our hero was relieved to see her unharmed when he heard Fenrir's barking. Sumu wondered why an unconscious and beaten-up man was lying on his floor when he suddenly realized. He patted the furball who protected his little sister from this man. The crook was a complete stranger to our hero, but he could tell that the beaten-up man was, in fact, an awakener, and assumed that he had bad intentions when breaking into his house. With that, Sumu thanked Fenrir before asking him to guard their home for a little longer. With a curt bark, the wolf of divine slaughter agreed. Murderous intent filled our hero's eyes. The awakener began to wake up. The tied-up man was confused about where he was when someone talked to him. He was startled to see his target's big brother above him. Su was surprised that the man knew him and decided to interrogate him. But as our hero was talking, the gangster decided to insult him, making him angry as he stated that this rope wasn't enough to contain him. Su was now sure that the man had bad intentions on his mind as he slapped his hand on his shoulder, making him scream in pain. When suddenly, Su interrupted his loudness by putting his hand on the goon's mouth. Su stated that he would turn from an interrogator to an executioner if the loud man woke his little sister. He then proceeded to get a clean punch on the man's stomach, before stating that he doesn't usually believe someone with unharmed arms and legs. It was now nighttime. The gangsters were shocked at what they were seeing. Su was now in front of them with the beaten-up man lying on the ground. The aggravated protagonist had business with the one called Myung Jigwan. The young man stood menacingly in front of the gangsters. He kept demanding for a leer. This annoyed the Pandemonium members, who started to think of Su as a crazy man. One of them approached him, put his hand on his shoulder, and advised him to turn back for his own safety. The gangster presented Myung Jigwan as a dangerous man that shouldn't be messed with, but Su kept insisting on knowing his location. This greatly annoyed the gangster, who began to threaten the young man but was interrupted mid-sentence. A merciless Su grabbed him by the collar, demanding answers. The gangster tried to free himself, but was terrified to find out Su's strength. The next moment, the gangster was easily punched away. which terrified the other members who had a hard time believing what was happening. With that, they decided to engage and beat him up. Two of them charged at him, stating that he was overestimating his own power and that he should be humbler. Suwoo decided to use his divine combat arts and prepared to deliver a punch. One of the men was knocked back by the protagonist's destructive blow. The other gangsters grew more scared by the second upon witnessing this power, as the Awakener kept asking the same question. He then grabbed the bald one by the face, leaving the last one scared for his life. Suwoo was determined to know where Myeon Jigwang was hiding. Meanwhile, in the Seoul branch of the Hunter Inspection Bureau, someone alerted the leader of Pandemonium's activity. The team leader was shocked and asked if they triangulated the location of the gang members. The woman denied but affirmed that the criminals would soon be located with the clues on their hands. With that, the woman in charge ordered to fully gather Team 4 and bring every free guard as support. She even demanded the immobilized guards from the rushing worker. But just as she thought of entering the field herself, a hand touched her shoulder from the back, interrupting her train of thought. The man claimed that there was an urgent case that required her intervention, but just as she was about to refuse, the man claimed that it was a request from the chief himself. This shocked the team leader. The man stated that she should rush to Sangdo-dong, where a C-rank dungeon shock was signaled. But the team leader wanted the bureau to send a team in her place, so the man brought up the support she requested. He then threatened to deny her request for backup, claiming that they would hear from the chief in case of disobedience before claiming that he wouldn't be responsible for what happens next. The team leader was disgusted by this individual being the section chief of the Hunter Inspection Bureau, but she didn't care about keeping her job anymore. Lee Minjin claimed that the man was free to fire her as she headed out. An impressive number of Pandemonium members had gathered in order to defeat Suwoo. Our hero counted 100 Awakeners that were above average, but decided to enter this difficult battle anyway since these gang members tried to hurt his little sister. If the big brother doesn't firmly stand his ground here and now, Pandemonium could go after her once again. With that, Suwoo decided to take them on and inspire fear in the cowardly hearts of those he compared to brainless animals rather than push for negotiation. Our hero decided to traumatize them to the point where they would tremble at the mere mention of his name as someone who shouldn't be messed with. With that, Suwoo confronted the first attacker, and just like that, the fists of the two Awakeners clashed together. Suwoo easily emerged victorious by knocking the man back. The gang members realized how strong their aggressor was and decided to attack him from all directions instead of rushing headfirst. Suwoo speculated that his opponents would come at him in groups of 3 or 5 since attacking in any bigger number would turn their numerical advantage against him. Seeing how the criminals charged at him in numbers without getting in each other's way reminded him of the formation arts, which the gangsters were mimicking as they were used to fighting people. Our hero then remembered a video from Gatu where the Gatu proclaimed that life and death were the evident key to disrupting formation arts. As he rushed in, Suwoo began dashing at an incredible speed, knocking down the gangsters in his path. Despite being diverse, the formation arts followed the same principle, and despite not fully understanding the Godtuber, Suwoo grasped the main idea behind it as he could hardly see it. He was eyeing a small space between the attackers coming his way. According to the insiders Zhuge Liang, this small gap was none other than the giant door of life. With that, our hero began to pass between the many gangsters. The gang members had a hard time believing their eyes. Suwoo began to sweat from all this effort. Our hero then remembered a Godtuber stating that one's body possessed many vital points that served as a center for their ki. Suwoo used this knowledge to puncture the set points of the gang members in order to vanquish them. You can only see lethal risks everywhere without glimpsing an escape. Suwoo was finally surrounded by the gang members. Doesn't matter how sharp one's skills are, since facing the large number of opponents would always be a challenge. Our hero then recalled Hercules, stating that it was impossible to face too many foes at once and how sometimes one would fail to find a way out before. According to the god, the solution was to use brute strength to break free. The gangster was terrified by what he was seeing. Suwoo was called a monster when the crook noticed the shadow of Hercules above him, and by defeating them one by one, their strongest member would show himself at the end. Myeon Jigwang demanded to know who was the one tearing through his underlings. For some reason, the leader always appeared at the end of the fight. Myeon Jigwang turned around and found an angry young man ready to punch him in the face, before striking him right in the face, and by doing this, smashing him into the wall. The angry big brother was ready to terminate the strongest gang member, just like Hercules told him. Just like that, the several-level executive was sent flying into the wall. The other gang members were shocked to see someone as strong as Myeon Jigwang in this state. He was vanquished by one blow. But Suwoo was still filled with anger. Myeon Jigwang started to cough blood. His underlings were shocked to see the several-level executive getting back on his feet. Myeon Jigwang started to analyze Suwoo. The man in front of him looked weak at first glance. Yet this surprise punch would surely have been lethal if he didn't defuse the impact, which made him wonder who the man in front of him was. Suwoo wanted to know if he was the mastermind. The big brother wanted to know if this man was the one who ordered his little sister's kidnapping, and at first Myeon Jigwang didn't recognize the name. But he then realized that the man in front of him was his target, Myeon Suwoo, who kept demanding answers. Myeon Jigwang then remembered him as the face on the job request. but his superiors falsely classified him as a mere D rank. Our furious hero was getting angrier and decided not to repeat himself anymore. The sever-level officer affirmed that he was behind the kidnapping, thinking that his target was falsely labeled weak but wasn't necessarily strong. With that, our hero charged at the gangster, closed the distance between them in an instant as he got ready to punch him once again in the face. The area began shaking. Miang Jigwan was able to block Suo before complimenting his phenomenal speed. Despite putting all of his focus into the battle, the scared man failed to keep track of his opponent's attack. For the Pandemonium executive, the fight was nothing more than difficult. The buildings began to shake once again as something started to grow. Miang Jigwan observed that Suo possessed an ability that granted him strength. The Pandemonium top-ranking executive Miang Jigwan used his physical enhancement to turn himself into a muscular giant, and claimed that the protagonist's power was just a weaker copy of his own ability as he punched him away. But the protagonist managed to keep himself on his feet. Rage and fury filled the big brother's eyes. Suo managed to get a clean hit on Hyung Jigwang's stomach before getting knocked back. The sever-level executive couldn't believe that someone this strong was considered D-rank when he was able to counterattack in a small instant. Hyung Jigwan was now sure that his opponent was his true target, and so the criminal decided to forgive the influencer for every wrong he did to them until now. The gang members were left confused. That's when their leader invited Suo to be a part of Pandemonium. With a murderous look, he silenced those who objected to his invitation, leaving the gang members surprised. Hyung Jigwan claimed that someone as strong as Suo and him was superior to the rest of humanity, meaning that he shouldn't be living like the rest of them. He considered it injustice when powerful individuals remained bound by rules made by the weak to benefit the weak. Powerful people like them shouldn't be living in the shadow of inferiority. Hyung Jigwan stated that the weakling should be dying for them instead. Power oppresses weakness and steals everything it has. He then proceeded to compare their current situation to the law of the jungle, where strength determines everything. But Suo decided to ignore the man's speech, claiming that he only kept silent because Hyung Jigwan seemed to have something to say. This mockery greatly angered the criminal. Hyung Jigwan then mocked the man for acting as such out of love for Suo. Suo wanted to know what his opponent found ridiculous about affection. The sever-level executive related a heart full of emotions to weakness itself, but our hero disagreed. Suo stated that this was the essence of humanity that the wild man could never comprehend. Hyung Jigwan was getting angrier and considered the decline of his invitation the young man's death wish. The scared man grew even bigger, and stated that Suo would never be able to vanquish him. With that, Hyung Jigwan delivered a powerful hit. Yet the red-haired giant was less surprised. He was shockingly one who got knocked back by his own punch. Hyung Jigwan also suffered another hit from the young man in an unknown instant. The gangster then claimed that this would be the last time as he clashed fists with his powerful opponent, but his fist was pushed away. The sever-level executive had a hard time believing what just happened. Before screaming in pain after suffering another direct hit from Suo, the attacks were now much stronger than before. With that, the gangster was knocked off his feet, and with a trembling hand he affirmed that Pandemonium would avenge him. But Sevon didn't care about those threats and claimed that he would burn the organization if it tried to harm him. Hyung Jigwan was shocked by our hero, who was alone made himself an enemy of Pandemonium. Suo asked the rest of the gang members to watch closely. The terrifying amount of mana was coming out of him, leaving them petrified with fear. Suo was getting ready to deliver a destructive attack. At that moment, Hyung Jigwan realized that his adversary was surpassing human limits. Our hero was about to use the first form of Hercules' divine art. With that, our hero launched his attack. Suo used the falling dragon strike in order to finish off the defeated Hyung Jigwan. Lee Minjun arrived at the scene and demanded an update on the situation, but the officer claimed that it would be easier to explain by just showing her. All the Pandemonium members present had already lost consciousness when the Hunter Inspection Bureau arrived at the scene, but some of them were able to stay awake, so the team leader ordered to identify every awakened criminal on the scene. The officers should also identify the unconscious ones when they wake up and check their criminal records in order to see if they were ever charged with any grave crime. And if the crime was unforgivable, Lee Minjung ordered to execute them on site. With that, she asked Suo to stay on site and assist the others. The team leader noticed an unconscious red-haired man lying on the ground. She recognized him as the sever-level executive Miang Jigwan. Even Team 4 of the Inspection Bureau would have had a hard time fighting this man, and even the Bureau's butcher wouldn't have been able to damage him to this extent, making her wonder who could have possibly wiped him and the others out. Meanwhile, Suo was stinging himself with needles a little further away. Our hero was using the medical arts to heal himself, increasing them by 3.3%. He wondered when this nightmare would end. The descending dragon kick is too dangerous to use on humans, but Suo managed to control his strength far better than before in the dungeon, as he might have died using such power. But our hero was happy to see himself gaining some mastery over Hercules' divine combat arts. He was also happy that this long fight had improved all of his other skills as well, yet he still had much more to progress. Miang Jigwan was definitely far stronger than Kang Dakyul. Our hero then recalled how he made himself an enemy of Pandemonium and how he might cross paths with the executive at any moment. Yet Suwoo could not bring himself to leave them in peace as they tried to harm his little sister. He then recalled how the crook confessed that someone asked them to mess with him and how they decided to use his little sister during the interrogation in his house. Luckily, Fenrir was there to protect her. Our hero speculated that Blackie should be rewarded since he must have been working tirelessly after being asked to guard the house. Meanwhile, the man behind the desk wanted to know who defeated the several-level executive in some office. The other one claimed that it was the D-class hunter Suwoo. The Pandemonium Scar-level executive Oh Ju-won was angered upon learning that Myung Jigwang lost to someone this week, but the man claimed that they were still uncertain of his defeat, which angered the Scar-level executive, so the man started to blame the Inspection Bureau. This intrigued Oh Ju-won, who turned off his spiritual pressure. The Inspection Bureau mobilized the scene, and all the surviving gang members present had gone mad. Oh Ju-won still couldn't understand what the protagonist had to do with this incident, so the man informed him about the defeated executive's commission. So this must be Suwoo's fault since he was the target and the incident occurred while hunting him down. Yet the Scar-level executive speculated that it might be a coincidence. It was more logical to assume that they were vanquished by the Inspection Bureau and its butcher, who was fully capable of such a feat. According to the man, all those who escaped were terrified by the mere mention of Mang Suwoo's name. As he described this case as trauma, the Scar-level executive thought of how Suwoo was becoming their primary suspect and how he might be faking his status as a D-rank hunter. Suwoo would have then wiped out Pandemonium in the underworld of the Seoul area while concealing his identity, and lastly, there was a commission on him. Oh Ju-won considered those actions as Suwoo indirectly threatening them. He then ordered that everyone in their organization keep tabs on their newest enemy. The Scar-level executive would have personally killed Suwoo normally, and despite not minding the butcher, he wanted to know how invested the Inspection Bureau was in this case. He was then shocked to hear that Bak Seung-jae was involved in the case as well as the general inspector. Meanwhile, in the Inspection Bureau, someone was yelling at Lee Min-jung for acting so recklessly and being overconfident in her skills. The Seoul branch chief of the Hunter Inspection Bureau, Kim Ji-pul, was angered by the team leader eliminating some of the criminals and defying his orders. Lee Min-jung apologized, stating that they all turned out to be hardened criminals. But Kim Ji-pul didn't want to hear any of it since they were already unable to defend themselves, meaning that the woman committed murder rather than her job. With that, the branch manager decided to relieve her of her position. Her subordinates in the back tried to defend her, stating that the butcher was just doing her job. Kim Ji-pul stated that he wouldn't fire them out of respect for their team leader. With that, Lee Min-jung accepted being relieved of her post. One of the workers accused the branch manager of being a corrupt man who could be bribed and helped criminals. The angry man demanded to know who insulted him as such. With a menacing look on her face, the team leader claimed that she would leave the Inspection Bureau, but Kim Ji-pul shouldn't go after her subordinates. This gaze calmed the angry man, when suddenly, someone entered the room stating that they should all leave the team leader by herself. That man's presence shocked everyone. The Inspector General of the Hunter Inspection Bureau, Bak Seung-jae, was there for the Pandemonium case. Before turning to the branch manager and accusing him of not taking the #1 international criminal organization seriously, Bak Seung-jae then recalled how someone accused him of being on the side of the criminals, so Kim Ji-pul claimed that the general inspector had it all wrong. But the man in charge then stated that they would find the truth after an investigation. The Inspector General then turned to the team leader. He wanted to converse with the Inspection Bureau's butcher. After that, he directly asked her if she was behind the incident. This man was responsible for stopping multiple criminal organizations from corrupting the country and was a living obstacle in the face of injustice. But he was also the child of one of the 13 heroes, Bak Seon-pyong, and now the general inspector wanted to know if bloodshed was necessary on this mission. Yet when she started to defend herself, he began to talk about how Awakeners were a ray of hope for the human race in the past. His power is now a way to make profit, but also a trend, according to the man's father. But unlike his father, who was quick to achieve inner peace, some, like Pandemonium, abused their power. Bak Seon-pyong complained about this injustice but insisted on letting it be, as he wouldn't be any different from the likes of Pandemonium if he tried to use power to assert dominance. The hero claimed that he couldn't become justice, but his son thinks that one doesn't need to be totally just to assert it, and even if they might need to restrain themselves, one cannot fight injustice with clean hands. With that, he asked the team leader once again if bloodshed was necessary. Lee Min-jung confirmed that it was crucial before he asked her if she was behind it. She denied it, stating that they couldn't identify anyone exiting the scene despite using the CCTVs. The team leader then stated how some of the ones who were awake had gone mad, which intrigued the Inspector General. The gang members were consumed by fear as they repeated a certain name. This name didn't belong to an S-rank hunter, as one would expect, but a D-class hunter. Seeing the cat's joy, he asked if Blackie was enjoying the meal. While interacting with a small animal, he was surprised by Siwa, who had just woken up. It was excellent that he had fixed the doorknob in time, preventing any suspicion from arising, which increased his proficiency in metallurgy. Skill is not limited to forging equipment. Unexpected things can happen, and it's good that he is capable of solving them. Thinking about this, he began to wonder if he should build a new house. because even if dungeons or unusual events arise, he will still be able to protect the girl. He just doesn't know where he will build this new residence because thinking about his sister, he can't stay too far from Seoul. There's also a lot of money left over now, which made him consider buying the house where he is currently living. Bidding farewell to the other residents, he announced that he needed to take care of some things. That intimidating man had a question to ask. He wanted to know what the young man in front of him was named Mang Soo. Curiously, the boy didn't know who he was, yet he had seen that face on the news. That's when he finally remembered that the person in front of him was none other than Barry Shenja. It made no sense for the general inspector to be standing there before him, which made the boy start thinking about various possibilities. It was possible that he was there to find out what had happened in the underworld the previous day. He should have acted more cautiously, but had ended up getting too carried away. It was surprising that the inspector had shown up so quickly, and trying not to let his anxiety take over, he acknowledged that the man could be there for another reason. The boy confirmed his identity, and the inspector wanted to know if he was responsible for what happened in the underworld the day before. After doing that to those people, he was still able to enjoy life quite peacefully. The girl was scared upon realizing he had been found out. His instincts told him he couldn't win in a fight, that he would certainly end up dead. His body was urging him to run, but he couldn't leave his sister alone, even if Blackie helped him. It was necessary for his courage to remain intact, and trapped in his own thoughts, he hadn't noticed that the inspector had grabbed him by the shoulder. Barely able to pay attention to what was happening due to his nervousness, he heard the inspector ask if he would like to become a guard. An unlikely outcome indeed, and returning to reality, he started wondering if the salary would be worth it since he knew they ranged from a few $100 million to billions of coins. Knowing that he didn't need much, the opportunity was good, more than enough to sustain himself. The boy just didn't understand why he had received such a proposal, and found it strange that the inspector left as soon as he rejected it. Still thinking that he might be under investigation, the situation made him a bit apprehensive, and he needed to focus on the work he was doing now. Going to another place where his landlady lived, he started talking about the house he was currently living in. Being frank with the woman, he asked if she was interested in selling the property. Without knowing the boy's purpose, she reassured him that she wouldn't sell the property while they were living there since selling prices weren't good either. The demand for rentals had grown much more, and realizing she was straying from the topic, she reaffirmed that she wouldn't sell until the boy started explaining himself better. He was direct in saying that his intention was to buy the house, and after hearing that, the woman asked if he could afford it. Since the boy was an awakened one, he had been making a lot of money, and having some savings, he considered buying the property. The woman congratulated the young man on his achievements, recommending that he buy a newer and better located house. But if his desire was to stay in the same place because he was attached to it, the woman then said she was willing to sell the house for $150 million. The young man was surprised by the price, which was very cheap, and in response, the woman said she wouldn't be able to sell it quickly, and that the price was fair. The young man refused to buy the house for such a modest amount. If it weren't for the woman in front of him, he wouldn't be alive today, which was why he wanted to buy it for $1 billion. Hearing those words come out of the boy's mouth left the woman shocked. Inside the subway, the boy started realizing that building a house was even more troublesome than he had imagined. There was a lot of bureaucracy involved, and it would take months before he could obtain a permit, not to mention that he would have to handle the paperwork himself. He had been so busy in recent days that he hadn't even managed to upload a single video, and he also needed to prepare for his private fencing lesson. Knowing it was inevitable, he paid the amount of $2 billion for his subscription to gain access to the content. The boy is spending his money very quickly, which makes him a little sad. Because of the way things are going, he thought about asking her directly. The woman knows that he made her wait a little. The more time passes, the more beautiful she becomes. That's what the boy is thinking. The woman wants to know what the tuition fee will be. He's about to announce the price for 2 lessons per week, which would be exactly $10 billion. He's very anxious to know what she thinks about it, but the woman responded too quickly, saying she understood. Immediately, he started thinking that her reaction was very natural. Perhaps for the shproop, that amount is insignificant. If he had known it would be like this, he would have asked for more, but the woman said that was the exact amount she had planned to propose. Her grandfather would never allow a higher expense than that, especially since it will have to be paid monthly. He's very happy that the deal worked out, as it will guarantee him $120 billion per year. With the negotiation concluded, he said he had a favor to ask. The boy wants to build a house, but bureaucracy is delaying his projects too much. She was impressed that he wanted to do that. She briefly reflected on the boy's request. She said she would help him with this task, and he immediately thanked her. He forged another piece of equipment, but it could only be used once, even though he had used better ingredients. His friend was impressed with the object that had been made. He had never seen anything like it. Since Sharon was in charge of handling house matters, there was only one thing left for him to do. A red-haired girl announced her arrival. The man hadn't heard from her for some time and asked what she had been up to. She also greeted Sue, asking what he had been doing. Sue couldn't get straight to the point, saying that he had been doing various things. This made him remember everything he had gone through up until now. Knowing that explaining everything would be even more troublesome, he simply told the girl not to worry. She stated that if he needed help, he could count on her immediately. Seeing a golden opportunity, he said he had a favor to ask of her. It wasn't a special request. He just needed construction materials. The girl was still disoriented by the boy's sudden approach. Indeed, this wasn't difficult, but she didn't understand why it was so sudden. That's when Sue stated that he wanted to build a house. The girl immediately realized what was happening. She understood that he wanted to build a house with his own hands. And even though he had excellent skills in forging equipment, building houses was something entirely different. Sue handed her a piece of paper with a list of the materials needed. These were not ordinary construction materials. Reading more carefully, the girl began to feel impressed. She became indignant upon realizing that he intended to build a house using monster materials. Sue planned to make the house a piece of equipment. Noticing that the team leader was approaching, she asked what he wanted. He replied that Ju-won might be aware of what they were doing and only wanted to cover his own actions. If that was the case, the inspector considered it regrettable. He even tried to change the subject by talking about the drink he was having, but the team leader said he should leave the boy alone. Yoon Min-jung agreed with that opinion. Despite his appearance, he seemed to be a very humane person. The inspector wanted to know how long this man had been working in investigations. He found out it had only been 7 years, but he himself had trained with his father for 8 years, awakening at the age of 11. After completing his training, he was instructed by his father to go out and experience the world. He did so for 5 years before finally starting his investigative work, which he had now been doing for the past 20 years. He had fought many people and taken down numerous criminals, probably more people than monsters. People could be worse than those creatures, as there were many treacherous individuals. This made him distrust people, and he always acted cautiously with newcomers. Anyone could be a potential criminal, yet he still trusted a few people. He asked the team leader if he could guess what kind of people he trusted, but the leader couldn't even make a guess. The inspector trusted those who had to support their families. That was not an easy task and required great sacrifice. That made all parents in the world incredible, and Sue had an additional challenge. He needed to save his sick sister. Even so, he still has a very suspicious nature. However, the inspector doesn't care if he's hiding his classification. Guards are known as butchers of people, and that assumption is not wrong. They have to keep hunting criminals so that they can build a world where everyone lives in peace. Because that is the world his father also protected, and now the inspector is heading to the S group. Notice made the team leader very apprehensive. Once again, the inspector reinforced that their blades must be pointed at criminals. Soon plans to turn the house into a piece of equipment. The man wants to know if he understands anything about civil engineering. The young man knows nothing, but wants to try. The girl realized that this would be difficult. The problem isn't money, although it is an obstacle. The necessary ingredients come from monsters that are very difficult to defeat. Besides, they are commonly used in other recipes, making them scarce. Perhaps you won't be able to get them in the quantity he wants. The boy felt a bit uncomfortable, and the girl stated that he could get everything as long as he paid more. By paying 3 times the market price, he could obtain them, which would cost a total of 3 billion. The amount left the boy completely terrified. The truth was that he had the money for it, but he didn't like to spend it. He could build the house in a simpler way, but he couldn't compromise his sister's safety. He asked the girl to get whatever was easily available. The first problem he would face was the difficulty of buying these items from those who possessed them. Because of this, he realized that he could collect the items himself. The problem was that the monsters were A rank, while he was still D rank. Full of motivation, he thought that he should dedicate himself a little more to improving his hunter classification. He could do this by being recognized for his achievements. He could also be examined so that his progress could be confirmed. The second possibility was only possible because of the second awakening. The second awakening could bring a new trait to its user, or it could further strengthen an already existing trait. It is unknown what causes this, but they have started happening more frequently. Sue began to think about being reevaluated. With the traits he had now, he could undergo reevaluation. Seeing everything he possessed now, he thought he shouldn't waste any more time. Inside a room, the women were talking. The director did not expect a visit from her niece. Her name was Han Mina, and she worked for the S group. Thanks to her niece's work, the company had stabilized again. The girl said that her aunt's efforts were also important. The woman was bothered by being constantly called director. Embarrassed, the girl said that she had come to speak with the director, not with her aunt. For her, that wasn't necessary, as she saw her niece growing into a beautiful woman. Her growth hadn't been easy, having not been left behind by her father. In the company, the relatives were nothing more than competitors. Her personality ended up being shaped by that environment. She wouldn't have survived if not for what her brother had done. She could barely help her niece during her childhood, but things would be different now. She wanted to know what had brought her there. The girl revealed that she wanted to build a house and asked if she could use the company's name. Her aunt thought it would be a village, but the girl clarified that it was just a house. She became concerned for the girl, assuming she wasn't happy with where she lived now. That fact couldn't be ignored. She stated that she would speak with the president, as he could bypass part of the bureaucracy to ensure the construction happened quickly. Only then did the girl reveal that someone else would be the builder, but they needed to use the company's name. All these details were too difficult for her aunt to understand. She managed to return to the room where the evaluation was taking place. All the people requesting a re-evaluation never imagined that they might receive a lower class rating. And one day, she had been just like those people. During the wave of awakenings, she had expected to receive high-ranking abilities. She ended up receiving something that couldn't even be measured, a normal person who wouldn't even reach F rank. But this time, everything would be different in her life. After waiting for some time, it was finally her turn to be attended to. Through a scan, her new traits would be identified. She was instructed to step onto the machine immediately. She needed to remain still throughout the entire process. Stu currently had 6 awakened traits. The world was about to turn upside down. He didn't want to be a center of attention, as that would also bring danger, but his recent battles had given him confidence. He was capable of defending himself. There is no need for him to fear the world just yet. The unexpected result appears. He's imagining that this might be the birth of the first SS-class hero, or even the first SS-class hero. Unfortunately, nothing changed. Even after being evaluated again, he remains below F-class. He has no idea how this could be possible. Frustrated, he imagined that the result must have been a mistake. People can only be examined again once. It didn't take long for him to become completely dejected, wishing to retake the test. Outside, he started thinking about why nothing had changed. It's impossible that this is happening again. Perhaps divine traits are not being detected. The more he thinks about it, the less sense it makes. Maybe it's like Hercules said. His trait is having no trait at all, which is why his test results remain the same. Even though that makes a lot of sense, he can't be sure about it. Examining the abilities he has improved, he still hasn't reached 100% in any of them. Without an explanation for anything at all, he doesn't know what to do now. Since he has no trait, he is the only one capable of learning the trait of the gods. That's what he learned from Hercules. And he still doesn't know who that blonde-haired man is. It almost seems like he already knew who the young man really was. He's grateful for having been given a chance and deeply regrets the situation. Thinking about this event maybe isn't the reason either. Since his evaluation failed again, he needs to keep diving into dungeons. He must become an A-rank hunter. He has no idea how long that will take since he hasn't posted any videos lately. His brilliant mind has an impressive idea perfectly suited to his current difficulty. The man is surprised that the chief inspector came to him like this. He is grateful for being received despite not having announced himself. Han Kwang-luk is the director of the S Group and asked the man to take a seat. This company is one of Korea's pillars today. The inspector wants to get to know the man in charge of the company better. Because he is directly involved with the country's security, handling a company of this size demands a lot from him. He needs to please his superiors while always exceeding expectations. Perhaps to achieve that, he has to stab people in the back. There are many things he doesn't care about, but Sue was not one of them. The man started to feel nervous. The inspector already knows that they wanted to remove Han Charon, and that they even helped that person invade the dungeon. Isn't that a clear sign that they shouldn't get involved with pandemonium again? Even though it was Rube, standing before him was Buck. He is the son of one of the 3 heroes who saved humanity, a being they should never have messed with. He just wants to know why this man is protecting Suwoo. Announcing his departure, he advised them to be cautious with company matters because he did not want to have to get involved. The girl tries to apologize to her boss. She says it's okay if she doesn't get paid. She just doesn't want to be fired. Stewie didn't understand any of that drama, nor why the girl didn't want to be paid. She doesn't want to receive her salary until the channel grows, assuming her boss wanted to shut it down. But that doesn't make any sense to him. Maybe she thought that because of his recent inactivity online. Sitting down together, he wanted to understand better why she didn't want to receive her salary. She said she had an excellent workplace and hadn't done anything in the past month. Sue repeated that they had already agreed on the salary and that he had no intention of shutting down the channel. He had actually come to her to discuss new content. The girl felt more at ease, and that was what they were about to talk about now. Today was payday, so he advised the girl to take her siblings somewhere nice. When he was younger, his father always took him to a special restaurant, and for every younger siblings, Diaku was a maternal figure. She muttered a few words, surprising the young man. She wanted him to call her by her first name without any formal titles. After all, he was older than her and also her boss. Finding her reaction amusing, he said the girl should do the same. They could have a much more casual conversation. Struggling to hide her shyness, she said she would try her best. For now, she wanted to know what new content he had in mind. At the Hunter Association, the day was going on as usual. Sue was there too. The secretary immediately recognized the person who had no trait. She asked what had brought him there that day. The young man was interested in knowing how they measured performance. The woman was impressed that he had reached D rank despite having no trait at all. That was almost impossible to achieve. Perhaps he was at his limit because she believed effort alone couldn't surpass talent. According to his parameters, he would need to clear 200 D-rank dungeons to advance to C rank. Since he did 3 per week, it would take a year. As soon as he completed the task, they would make a dungeon available for his evaluation. Sue understood the situation completely. So far, he had cleared 16 dungeons. Only 184 more to go. If he wanted to do one now, the secretary could assign one to him. Since he had no specific preference, he requested the closest dungeon. The secretary said there was one just 5 minutes away. She was quite apprehensive as she couldn't stop worrying about the boy's safety. He just needed to cross the intersection and go down 2 avenues, and he would reach his destination. As she called for the next client, the secretary was left astonished. It didn't take long for Sue to return. Since he was back in less than 10 minutes, maybe the dungeon had been too difficult for him. The young man didn't want to take up too much of her time. He just wanted to know about all the available D-rank dungeons. Her employee was still curious about what this new job was. It was a project for him to become an A-rank hero in just 1 month. Definitely a very bold task. The young man exuded confidence and would sell videos showcasing a strategy to become a hero-class hunter. He wanted to know where the 50 closest dungeons were. That would be enough. Inside the hunter management office, a man was running frantically. He reached his boss, who wanted to know what all the fuss was about. The young man said that the dungeon cleaner was there. That made him curious about how many dungeons the cleaner had already cleared. He learned that the number had already reached 150. That was unexpected for someone with no trade at all. They had reviewed the information. Was absolutely true. He might be an illegal awakened hunter. Another employee approached, saying that this person was requesting a promotion to C rank. The man was even more shocked. The time window for this had been extremely short. Not knowing what else to do, he decided to simply prepare a report to send to headquarters. A request had arrived for the team leader coming directly from the management office. It was about a hunter who had been promoted from D rank to C rank in just 3 days. They wanted him investigated. The woman was completely stunned when she found out that the target was Suwu. If he could do this so quickly, it was possible that he had undergone a second awakening. If he wished to be promoted based on his achievements, they needed to examine him. It was entirely possible that he was using illegal means to become more powerful. She went to Urim, asking if she was aware of what had happened. Immediately, she began explaining how magic worked and how it conformed to this world's rules. The team leader asked her to be more direct since she didn't have much time to waste. Dark magic was immersed in negative emotions tied to feelings. The more intense they were, the stronger the magic became. Because these emotions were so overwhelming, the fate of those who followed that path was obvious. They would soon lose their human form and become monsters. The team leader was interested in knowing how to differentiate a normal person from someone who practiced dark magic. Just by looking, it was possible to tell. Even for those who knew nothing about magic, she was aware that the general inspector had met with this young man and had even made an offer for him to become a guard. A proposal coming from her superior was a significant matter. Knowing what had happened, she requested that another office confirm that this person was clean. Even so, she continued to analyze Suwu's situation. The boy kept trying to improve his skills, but it was much harder than he had imagined. This was even more difficult than forging equipment. Architecture was on an entirely different level of complexity. When he first started, things were very different. Now he had time to level up and could even ask for favors from those who supported him. It wouldn't take long before he had the necessary skills to build a house. While he was thinking about whether his materials were being gathered, someone started approaching him. It was the girl responsible for acquiring the items he had requested. Suwu wanted to know if everything had been collected yet. She hadn't managed to get everything, but she was doing her best. She even revealed that she had a younger brother, who truly surprised Suwu. His name was Kim, and he was only 20 years old. At the moment, he worked as a hunter. He was the one who had obtained the items. None of the things she had acquired were ordinary. Suwu still couldn't access the places where those items were found. Suwu learned that the boy was a B-rank hunter with A-rank combat traits. The young man was not yet a fully matured awakened, as his life had changed only recently. His sister was only reassured because he had a regeneration trait, a skill that made healing happen much faster, almost as if he were a troll. She told Suwu to relax, as her brother would be helping with this. The owner of the place came to greet the girl. She wanted to know where the equipment she had ordered was. The two of them talked normally. Suwu started thinking that maybe he should collect the materials himself. Accepting the idea, he said he was already heading out and she could stay there if she wanted. After a long time, that editing session had finally come to an end. The girl had reached her limit, completely exhausted. All the videos combined totaled 22 hours. Normal people would take at least a year to advance to C rank, but he was truly incredible. He had sent a massive amount of material for her to edit. Even the girl had trouble believing what she was seeing with her own eyes. She was even more shocked when she realized she would have to edit the same content all over again. A massive deposit had suddenly appeared in the girl's account. She barely understood what it was. Sue explained that it was just a small bonus for the great work she had done. That motivated her even more as she was doing all of this for her younger siblings. The video was already finished and had been properly posted online. Sue really liked his employees' editing skills. In just one day, the video had almost 1 million views. Filming alone was not easy. He had managed to break several cameras. He started wondering if it wouldn't be a good idea to have another awakened person accompany him on his journey. On her phone, the girl received a call that made her extremely worried. Noticing that Sue had just arrived, she revealed that she hadn't seen her brother in a long time. The boy had gone to the Dragon Turtle dungeon, and since then, they had lost contact. Sue asked if she had already gone to the main office. They said that the young man had cleared the dungeon on the same day he entered. Liking other people was quite problematic. Sue hoped everything would turn out fine and safe. He said that his friend was probably having trouble waking up after drinking so much since they weren't that young anymore. The girl knew her brother wasn't that kind of person. Sue remarked that super regeneration was a very useful skill. Even so, she should leave a message with the main office so they could prepare for any situation. She said goodbye to him while holding her phone to her ear. For some reason, that didn't seem logical in any way. He was extremely frightened. In a dark and seemingly abandoned place, the young man had been imprisoned and locked inside a room. Not knowing how it all happened, he realized that his hands were restrained. Reevaluating some things, he remembered that he had recruited a team to help his sister. After completing their task, the team members suggested they go for a drink. So they all went out to have fun. The problem was that after that, he didn't remember anything else. He started thinking that he might have been kidnapped. A man said that he wouldn't be able to escape from those restraints because they were special. The boy began to feel afraid, wanting to know who this person standing before him was. That man was clearly a lunatic who introduced himself as an illegal awakened. At the very least, it could be said that they were his objects of experimentation. The problem was that they ignored his efforts and ended up dying, even though he had promised to make them stronger. His past failures were erased by the presence of this perfect victim. He couldn't wait to perform all his experiments on the young man. Sue and the girl began a training session. Taiji was based on the principles of yin and yang, which had opposing characteristics. Even so, they were interdependent and necessary to create and establish other things. At first, he planned to create a technique and teach it to her, but that would only make him more confused, so he decided to change his approach. By using Taiji, he would be able to create a foundation for himself, using the girl as his training partner. The goal now is to help her develop her own swordsmanship technique, different from Taiji. A technique that no one else will have, which will be at least S rank. If the girl masters the principles, she will be able to disarm opponents easily, just as Sue did with her now. Understanding her own progress, she found it too complicated. Sue could only grasp things because of his perception, while the girl understood his explanation. She was truly brilliant. He assured her that he would constantly remind her of the teachings so she could get used to them. Finally, the lesson came to an end. The girl mentioned that it would take her an entire month. Sue didn't understand what she was talking about, but it was about the favor he had asked of her. Finally realizing what she meant, he thanked the girl. She said it was nothing. Her family's company was likely far above Korean law. In a month, he would also have all the materials needed to start the work. At the team leader's office, they were discussing Yijun's disappearance. This document contained the names of the team members who had also entered the dungeon. Among them were illegal awakeners. In fact, except for Yijun himself, the rest of the group consisted entirely of illegal awakeners. It was as if he had been targeted by these people, especially since it was known that his trait was super regeneration. That meant he could even regenerate entire limbs. It was likely that he had been kidnapped to be used as a subject for illegal experiments. Sue wanted to tell his friend what had been happening. He had been so busy lately that he hadn't managed to talk to him. He had ignored his calls. He hoped his friend wasn't upset about it. Now he would have to wait for him to call again so they could discuss the videos. At the moment, he was busy fighting some creatures. These were B-rank golems. Taiji had a very different principle compared to Hercules' superhuman strength. In martial arts, there were three fundamental elements: mind, mana, and the body itself. He had the calm mind of Confucius, the strength of Hercules that represented the body, and now he also had Taiji, which represented his mana. Focusing more and more, he pointed his hand toward the creatures. Still standing still, they began to advance to launch their attack. Mana was something that existed within nature itself, present in all things in the universe. Accepting the existence of this power was what was called purification. Its efficiency also varied greatly depending on how the process was conducted. Allowing mana to flow completely through the body without purification was called Taiji. After gathering the mana, a great bluish flash appeared. Sue had to cover his eyes. When he opened them, he found only the cores of the creatures left. That was truly insane, and he had made progress in all of his traits. He had heard from Hercules that the skill would be useful, but the way he was now perceiving it, it was going to be insane. The recoil was indeed very strong, but he could combine it with other things as well. Taiji was not a power that the human body could withstand. He was incredibly lucky. The medical arts of Ho-Tu had proven to be extremely useful. He could only use a small fraction of this ability for now, but it was enough for him to control Taiji. He had only subscribed to Ho-Tu's channel to take care of his sister, but the medical knowledge was proving to be more valuable than expected. With this, his proficiency had reached 30%. Perhaps he could treat his sister well enough for her to go to college. That reminded him of another problem he needed to solve. He needed to find someone to help him record his videos. In one day, he had cleared 50 dungeons. He needed to clear a total of 500 to reach A rank. His pace was still too slow. He believed he would gather all the necessary materials within a month. All of this was only possible thanks to Blackie. He was going to buy a reward for him. Taking care of the cat cost him 60 million per month, more expensive than he had imagined. But if it was for Blackie, it was an expense worth making. When he opened the door, his sister was happy to see that he had arrived. She immediately went to greet him, saying that a guest had come to see him. Stu hadn't expected any visitors at this hour. He was curious to know who this person was. It was Lee Minjong, who had been waiting for him for a long time. The woman was impressed by the ferocity of the small creature. The brief scene left her speechless. Sue had always thought Minjong was a cold and expressionless person. Seeing this surprised him. He wanted to know what had brought her there. Unable to deny that he was still affected by her reaction, she apologized for showing up so late, but she had news about Yijun that couldn't wait. His sister started to look worried. He quickly realized that the news would not be good. He asked her to accompany him outside so they could talk more freely. Sue couldn't hide his surprise upon learning that Yijun had been kidnapped and was likely being subjected to experiments. And from the looks of it, that was probably exactly what happened. In the past, he had also suffered because he had no trait. Even though it was done legally, his body endured a lot. So illegal experiments must be incredibly painful. He needed to find his friend immediately. First, he wanted to know why Minjung had come to him. The woman didn't have to say much. She only mentioned pandemonium. They used a device capable of erasing footage from recordings, a device that even deceived S-rank hunters. However, there had been a certain incident that completely destroyed the underworld, and this feat had been accomplished by an unknown individual. In cases of kidnapping, there was something called the golden time. If that time expired, the chances of finding the victim alive dropped significantly. But that wasn't how the victim's family would see it. His sister believed she would find him alive. That wounded her pride as an inspector. But she had something to ask. She wasn't obligated to do this, and because of her sharp perception, she started to empathize with the woman's emotions. He could feel her shame, pride, and grief as a guardian, along with her extremely sincere request. He said that his sister was home now and asked Minjung to keep her company until he returned. He also ordered Blackie to stay on guard. They went to the place where his friend had last been seen. That was 3 days ago. After the dungeon, he had gone to a bar, the last place he had been spotted. Even if his scent remained in these places, it would be too faint by now. That's why Blackie was with him. He assumed the creature could sense magical power as well. Any residual magic should be much stronger inside the dungeon. The creature seemed to have sensed something. It tried to signal in it and identify the trail. Suwoo and the little creature started following the path. Inside a hidden place, the young man was suffering terribly. He barely had the strength to say anything. Meanwhile, his kidnapper was enjoying the whole situation. His mind was on the verge of collapse. He didn't know how much longer he could endure this agony. He wished his life would just end, but his kidnapper wouldn't allow that to happen. The man stated that if he lost his test subject, he would have to kidnap his sister instead. Remembering the only family he had left sent the boy into despair. The kidnapper claimed that, since they were blood relatives, she must have a similar ability as well. He said his sister had no ability that could be exploited. The kidnapper didn't believe those words. He would only know for sure after trying. The boy tried to gather the last of his strength to prevent his sister from being harmed. The horrifying session continued, seemed to have no end. The pain was so intense that he had no idea how much time had passed. He could only think of his sister. He couldn't die. He had to protect his sister at all costs, believing he could endure it. Unexpectedly, the wall behind him was destroyed. A person began approaching him. It was Sue who arrived, telling him that Yijun's sister was very worried. Immediately, Sue became concerned by what he saw. His friend's body was covered in extensive wounds. It was certain that they had already gone beyond the limits of his regeneration. His biggest fear was that his friend's mind had also reached its breaking point. The boy mumbled a few words, thinking about his sister. Sue quickly pulled out his needles. There was still a chance. He needed to treat his friend immediately, hoping he could hold on just a little longer. His eyes slowly began to open. He wanted to know if his sister was safe, and Sue was relieved to see signs of recovery. Finally, he turned his attention to the weirdo in the room, who looked absolutely terrified. He wasn't supposed to have discovered this place, because it was supposed to be a completely hidden space. The weirdo started having a breakdown. Sue was already feeling embarrassed by the tantrum of that disgusting person. He noticed that the place was filled with body parts. Thinking that a human had done this filled him with extreme disgust. He wanted to know why this person did such things. But the weirdo still wanted to know the identity of the intruder, until he suddenly calmed down, because he had just realized that the intruder was not an ordinary person. Noticing that began to fill the weirdo with excitement. The boy, still weak, begged his friend to flee immediately. The weirdo started thinking that this intruder must have incredible abilities, and without a doubt, that assumption was not wrong. Revealing a grotesque body, he was eager to soon discover what these abilities were. Grafting was a trait that worked well for farmers, allowing them to make a plant possess multiple qualities. The man with this ability began to despise himself for having such a useless characteristic that drove him into madness, leading him to do something he never should have done. He started using his ability on both monsters and humans. He even experimented on his own body, transforming himself into this completely monstrous figure. Once again, his friend warned him to run away from there. Sue showed no signs of fear or hesitation. Gathering strength in one of his fists, he said that what he was seeing was truly horrifying. Then he delivered a single, completely devastating strike against the kidnapper. An unusual scene. His friend hadn't even understood what had just happened. The damage inflicted on the kidnapper's body was simply absurd. Yet, his body was capable of regenerating. Observing more closely, Sue realized that it wasn't regeneration. The kidnapper was thrilled because he had finally found the perfect test subject. He possessed overwhelming strength, yet he still remained human. Unlike himself, who after so many experiments had become something else entirely. That was why a fragile human would never be able to reach him. The creature's massive hand approached, ready to strike. Desperate, the young man begged his friend to dodge. But there was no time for that. The impact landed, destroying the ground around them. A cloud of dust rose, forcing the boy to shut his eyes. When he opened them, he saw Sue effortlessly holding the creature's hand. The kidnapper couldn't understand how that was possible, as he could absorb that strength from a hunter. The result left him in despair. This should have been impossible. Tired of this despicable person's theatrics, Sue attacked once more. The kidnapper's terror immediately grew. Sue was attacking without even exerting much effort. The kidnapper had no idea what kind of being stood before him, and in an instant, he was brutally annihilated with just one blow. That whole scene made the boy wonder how Sue had managed to destroy a monster. Sue continued striking the kidnapper repeatedly. After taking so many hits, he still couldn't comprehend what was happening. A mere human wasn't supposed to have this kind of power. He assumed that Sue must have been born with talent, the kind of person he hated the most in this world, because those people always acted as if they were above everyone else. Sue found that justification idiotic, asking if the kidnapper only wanted to get stronger for that reason. Enraged, the kidnapper tried to paint himself as the victim, saying that Sue didn't understand what it was like to be looked down upon. Maybe Sue knew what it was like to be weak, but he had no idea how miserable life could be. Because awakened individuals, the strong ones, didn't achieve their power through effort alone. These same people told those who lacked talent that they were weak because they didn't work hard enough. The kidnapper despised those kinds of people. Now he had gained just enough time to launch another attack. Caught by the weirdo's speech, Sue thought it was a good moment to open up. He responded that he used to think the same way. He recalled a conversation he had with Hercules. He had asked what the demigod felt while completing the 12 labors. He wanted to know if Hercules had felt motivated. That was when Hercules revealed that during those days he had been thinking about ending his own life. He had been consumed by madness and had killed his own family. Every day of his life had been a living hell. He had been stopped by Theseus, who pointed out that such a sacrifice would be meaningless. The labors were a form of atonement. During those tasks, he often felt that he wouldn't be able to complete them. It sounded foolish, but he had considered giving up. That wasn't the vision of mythology that Sue had. Hercules said that results were important, but they weren't the only thing that mattered. More important than that was how one reached success, the path chosen to achieve it. People said he completed the labors because he was Hercules, or because he was simply a good person. But no one was born perfect. Life was full of challenges. Greatness and success weren't that complicated. The real struggle came from circumstances, and not all of them could be ignored. But beyond all that, there was only one thing that truly mattered. It was the reason each person had for surpassing their own limits, whether noble or childish. For those who sought to achieve something, everything depended on personal motivation, as it was what would lead them to their goal. Sue revealed that weaknesses didn't work the way the kidnapper thought. That degenerate was just making excuses for himself. The kidnapper began screaming in fury. Sue was aligning his mind, body, and psi in perfect harmony, allowing him to raise a barrier to shield them from the attack. He now used the second movement of Hercules' combat techniques, unleashing the divine annihilation against the weirdo, which destroyed nearly everything around him. After executing the attack, the scene before him was completely cleared. A strong glow filled the entire area. The boy noticed that everything was turning white. Sue was suffering a bit. The pain from using this technique was no joke. He hadn't wanted to use such a powerful technique, but he was tired of listening to that nonsense. The good thing was that it had worked. Under different circumstances, he might have lost consciousness. Turning his attention to the victim, he asked if he was able to move. He said yes, as his body had somehow recovered. However, he couldn't leave because he was still completely chained. The weirdo mentioned that not even S-rank hunters were capable of breaking those chains. Seeing Sue grab them, he repeated that they could be broken. It took him a moment to realize that he had finally been freed. After everything that had happened, he wanted to know who had saved him. Sue said that he was a friend of his sister, and that they were also friends. He had even thought they might be a couple, but Sue assured him they were just friends. He was still worried about his sister, wanting to know if she was okay. In truth, she had been very worried about him in the past few days. It was best that they talked in person. It might not seem like it, but Sue was quite exhausted at that moment. There wasn't much the boy could say in that situation. Bowing, he sincerely thanked Sue for saving him. Seeing his gratitude, Sue gave a subtle smile. It was finally time for them to go home. Some men arrived at the completely destroyed location. Juwan, an executive of Pandemonium, was furious upon seeing the devastation. There was no sign of the weirdo. He was certainly no longer among the living. Moreover, all of his research materials had been completely lost. They had planned to produce weapons and create monsters, but everything had been ruined. Years of planning had been destroyed in a single night. There were no traces of swords, so Bake was likely not responsible for this. It must have been someone else. They needed to leave immediately because the Guardians would be arriving soon. Full of rage, he wanted to know who was responsible for all of this. Upon arriving home, Sue discovered that his sister already knew everything. She had already suspected that her brother was a hunter and that he ran a channel of his videos. Minjung hadn't given many details, but she confirmed that he had been indirectly involved in the incident and had done her best to keep things discreet. Because she assumed that he must have had his reasons for not telling the truth, Sue just didn't want to worry his sister even more. He realized that she had always supported him. Minjung wouldn't stop praising his sister, saying they were a strong family. Very different from her own, she had a younger brother who was only 14 years old. In her memories, he had never aged. Stu immediately understood what those words meant. That weirdo was capable of graphing, able to absorb traits from other awakened individuals and even monsters. Sue then heard from Hercules that traits were far too unique and could not be suppressed by something equivalent. Even so, it was hard to say what was truly impossible. Pandemonium had wanted to create illegal awakeners with this ability. If they hadn't been stopped, the results would have been catastrophic. Minjung couldn't speak for everyone who worked with her, but from the bottom of her heart she was grateful. Shortly after, they launched a full-scale investigation into the organization. Because the event had been too brutal, it wasn't widely publicized. Yejun was able to return safely to his sister, bringing that chapter to a close. With that, Soo was able to resume his training. The more he practiced, the more his proficiency improved. In the process, he managed to break several cameras. The cost of replacing them was rising. He needed someone to help film his content. He was relieved to see that the camera's memory had remained intact. Now he had gathered many of the materials needed for construction. It might take some more time to collect everything, and it would take even longer to rank up. He was already being waited for outside the dungeon. It was the boy he had saved. Not knowing how he had been found, he was told that the management team had informed him. They hadn't told him directly, but they had provided a list of completed dungeons. He had to check each one manually. A truly exhausting task. Soo remembered that he could have just called. Even if he didn't have his number, he could have asked his sister. The boy hadn't thought of that possibility and considered it a very smart idea. Knowing that Soo was looking for some materials, he went to him to help. He said he didn't need help, much less to bother a B-rank hunter. He stated that he would help for free, which made Soo very interested. But he ended up refusing the help since Yejun's sister also helps a lot. He revealed that he had already reserved the Dragon Turtle Dungeon. He wishes that they can go there together, so he can prove his worth. Soo realized that he is very persistent, and not having to share the profits is a tempting proposal. Soon he reached a very interesting conclusion. That person has phenomenal regeneration, and in the worst-case scenario, Soo can use his medical skills. He approached the young man with great interest, asking if he knew how to use a recording camera. An intense explosion happened inside the forest. Soo was using his abilities. There was nothing that could withstand that power. Evaluating the effort he had put in, he realized that these turtles do not seem to have the resilience their appearance suggests. And using this technique, it seems that he attacks the hardness of the material itself without even feeling the impact. He did notice it the first time he used it, but now he is sure how it works. The true strength of Taiji lies in returning to nothingness. The technique nullifies the turtle's hardness, and this ability goes very well with Hercules' strength. When trying to pick up one of the scales, it crumbled in his hand. He needs to use less force. He asked the boy if the filming was going well, and he said yes. However, he couldn't hide his surprise as he had defeated 20 turtles in just 1 minute. Soo stated that the base salary would be 10 million, with some incentives based on the number of video views along with an additional hazard pay. Despite the circumstances, that was a good proposal. Full of motivation, he said he would do his best. At night, his Ultra employee kept working. She noticed that someone must be responsible for the filming now. With the camera in hand, the boy was already surrounded by powerful creatures. He was quickly attacked by one of them. That was not enough to defeat him, and the boy took his responsibility to protect the equipment seriously. The creatures struggled to understand why he was protecting that small object. Even the girl was shocked by what she saw in the footage. Stu made some recordings using his own phone. The girl was very happy and honored to be responsible for the recordings. The next day, he went to meet Soen. She had heard that her brother had been learning many things from him lately. Soo replied that it wasn't quite like that and that he was the one receiving help. Besides not breaking cameras anymore, the boy was taking care of other tasks without being asked. Due to the way things happened, she still hadn't been able to thank Soo for saving her brother. He said that the young man was a member of her family. That made her a little embarrassed. She didn't understand what he meant by family. Soo had to be clear, saying that the young man was her brother. But it was clearly perceptible that in some way in her peculiar mind she thought Soo meant that they were family. Perhaps this was due to the fact that her brother constantly referred to Soo as if he were his brother-in-law. No longer able to bear her own embarrassment, the girl left the place. He will soon become an A-rank hunter, and his channel continues to grow, already having almost all the necessary materials organized. It won't be long before he can build his own house. While trying to rest, he received a call. Hercules wanted to talk to him, a call he had been expecting. He had been so busy lately that he ignored his calls, forgetting to return them. It is possible that Hercules is a little upset. The boy didn't know how he should answer the call. He held the phone in his hand, still very apprehensive. But whatever happens, he will answer anyway. Hercules said that it had been a while since they last spoke. The boy noticed that his voice sounded calmer than expected, and Hercules said he was worried about him. He wasn't supposed to have ignored his calls, and it was clear that he was irritated. Stu said he had been very busy lately, a flimsy excuse. He started to explain everything that had happened, and Hercules said that apparently he had more important things in his life than him. He hadn't noticed that Hercules' channel had shrunk because he had lost some subscribers. What's done is done. Now they need to move forward. Summarizing that the boy was well rested, they focused on physical strengthening. It was time to start training immediately. Stu was already completely exhausted. Hercules was a very strict trainer. He is invalidating the repetitions that are not performed perfectly. Since the boy doesn't seem focused, he should do 10 more. They kept training until the moon appeared in the sky. Despite all the suffering, his proficiency had increased. With that intense training, it went up by 3%. But since his exhaustion was also extreme, the girl ended up vomiting. His body is already at its limit, If things continue this way, he will truly perish. Hercules said they were not done yet. It was not time to rest. Stu began to wonder if Hercules really intended to make him die from training. The next exercise would be simple. He had to do 3,000 burpees. But the boy could barely stand on his own feet. Huge pyramids were illuminated by the sun. At the top of them, a creature similar to a sphinx was flying. It landed at the top of the pyramid while being watched by Hercules. The creature wanted to know what he was doing there. It was nothing major. Hercules had just come to challenge it to a riddle. A peculiar proposal, as it was usually the one issue in the challenges. But doing things the traditional way wasn't very fun, so he suggested adding a new rule. Suwu was intrigued to realize that Hercules wanted to challenge the Sphinx to a riddle. There was a video about this. No one had ever answered correctly. Stu thought it was just a regular riddle, but Hercules warned him not to think that way. Even the god of wisdom had failed to answer correctly. Those who became obsessed after losing were just like the Sphinx itself. The boy quickly realized that if they won the challenge, they would be in a position of advantage. Hercules thought he could win, but that wasn't what the boy claimed. If the god of wisdom couldn't do it, they wouldn't be able to either. Hercules was irritated, but there was a way. Their goal was not to win. Hercules didn't understand what that meant. They didn't need to focus on victory. They should concentrate their energy on something else, which was attracting more people to their channel. That's why Hercules wanted to add a new rule. The proposal intrigued the Sphinx. Every time he answered incorrectly, it would take a hit. The Sphinx was very scared because it knew what one of his punches meant. It proposed that it would ask 2 questions while he would ask only one, allowing it to hit him if it got the answer right. Feeling challenged, it agreed to these terms. This was its chance to finally surpass Hercules. He waited for it to ask its first question. I am born in water, but when I enter the water, I die, only come to life again when I leave the water. What am I? After thinking briefly, Hercules said it was a whale, but the correct answer was salt. The Sphinx was impressed by his lack of effort. Hercules wanted to know what it was waiting for. It wasn't sure if it could really hit him. It was still scared. Hercules said that rules were rules. He wouldn't do anything. Ignoring the potential danger, it decided to hit him anyway. Hercules wiped a little blood from his face while complaining about the dust. The Sphinx was terrified, thinking he would retaliate, but he was just waiting for the next question. With more confidence, it asked, what does not change color even when it changes clothes? Hercules said black clothes, but the correct answer was a shadow. Now it would hit him with full force. As a result, a violent shockwave spread through the area. A little injured Hercules said that now it was his turn to ask a question. It didn't matter what he asked as long as it answered correctly. He wanted to know, if a centaur gets pregnant, which side of its belly will grow? Faced with this question, the Sphinx had no answer. Hercules started pressing it, which left the creature desperate. But it didn't know which side would be the correct one. The thought of a riddle it couldn't answer started to worry it greatly. Hercules started stepping forward, saying it was time for it to prepare to take a hit. That only made it even more terrified, imagining that it was going to die. It asked him what the correct answer was. He reminded it that the penalty for a wrong answer was receiving a hit. It became very upset, and Hercules reminded it that they had a riddle, but he never mentioned that he had an answer to it. The Sphinx tried to flee, begging to be spared. Since it wasn't going to fight back, he would strike first. Using his divine annihilation technique, he launched his powerful blow at it. Su was very impressed to realize that this was the true technique of the hero. Because of this, they had gained many views, earning a large number of new subscribers to the channel. At the S Group headquarters, important people were gathered. Someone heard that Sharon asked for help for a man named Suwu. She wanted to know what kind of relationship this young man had with her niece. They didn't know the nature of their relationship, but they had been meeting 2 to 3 times a week, and they were alone during these meetings, which surprised the woman. Her niece was just a child not long ago, but now she was a woman who rejected the advances of many men and was now meeting one. As her aunt, she couldn't just stand by in the face of such an event. Hercules was very pleased with the strategy. Thanks to it, he now had 1,000 subscribers on his channel. Sumu stated that it wasn't necessary for him to bow. Hercules regretted holding a grudge because his teacher was truly a great strategist. Sumu understood how he must have felt because he had promised to help him, and you should stand up. Hercules said he couldn't do that because he hadn't understood his teacher, and it was entirely his fault for not being patient. Sumu was worried about the Sphinx, but he soon found out that it was still alive. Hercules took pity on it when he saw it begging for its life, landing only a weak strike. After that, he ended up taking something from it, which was actually given as a gesture of gratitude. Sumu realized that he had received a gift. He didn't know what to do with it. He had become a member of the Sphinx's channel, so he decided to give it to his teacher. Sumu could subscribe to that channel for free, and since it was usually a costly process, this was very advantageous. That was the best gift he could receive, as was the other thing Hercules had received from the Sphinx. A voucher that granted him a single meeting with Cleopatra. Hercules knew that she was a woman as beautiful as the goddess Aphrodite. He strongly recommended that the boy meet with her at least once. The waitress approached Su's table, bringing the food he had ordered. He had no idea how things had ended up this way. Before him sat Cleopatra herself. He never imagined he would have a video called dinner with her. The people around him must have thought he was crazy, but the truth was that the woman was truly stunning. He tried to remember Confucius' advice to value wisdom. Her beauty was so overwhelming that it seemed to enhance his mental proficiency. Cleopatra asked why they weren't married yet, leaving the boy stunned. He didn't understand what she had just said. He assumed she must be out of her mind, and even Cleopatra knew that was what he was thinking. Saying as she thought exactly that, she found it too cruel. But she was the one who had brought up this topic out of nowhere. She confessed that she said it as a joke. She never imagined he would react that way and assumed he was just playing hard to get. But Sue assured her that he had only spoken the truth. This was the first time a man had done this to her, as if every other man had always been willing to do whatever she wanted. Indeed, it was easy to see how one could surrender completely to a beauty like hers. Once again, Cleopatra asked why they weren't getting married, and the boy still didn't understand why she always jumped to that conclusion. He assumed he was the target of a joke, but she insisted that she was being completely serious. Showing some insecurity, she asked if she looked ugly to him, to which the boy responded that they couldn't even meet in person. Cleopatra wanted to know if love required physical contact. He said it wasn't strictly necessary, but that it would be nice, brutally hiding his real thoughts that physical contact was essential. She assumed that the boy had no desire for her, while he stated that he would not give in to temptation because he would only surrender completely to someone he loved. Cleopatra's gaze suddenly changed. This time she confirmed that she was truly interested in the boy, even managing to read his thoughts. His abilities were progressing slowly, and he couldn't let his guard down against this woman. Since he was human, he would never be able to meet her. But she said he must not be entirely human, as he was able to resist her advances. She even wondered if he had issues with his more private aspects. Irritated, he suggested they just finish the meal. Smiling, she said it was just a little joke, and in a seductive tone she asked what he would think about becoming a god. Once again the boy stated that he was just a human, and Cleopatra replied that she had once been one too. If he were a god, they could meet. In fact, there was a way to make that happen, even with him being human. For that to happen, she would have to go to him. As far as the boy knew, they were in completely different dimensions. Originally, yes. Imagining that there must really be a way, Cleopatra stated that he already knew what it was, because there was someone who had managed to cross the god tube. Very interested, Sue wanted to know what Cleopatra knew about it. To give him the information, the goddess moved very close to his face, only to say that it was a secret, and that he shouldn't be interested in a woman's secret. The boy was being watched. They knew he had ordered food for 2 people, but remained alone. She was very worried because she had gone there to find out if the boy who had caught her niece's interest had good character. A woman in love could lose her reason, and now she needed to check the situation for herself. She ordered her driver to hurry to the destination. Still trying to seduce him, she said she could tell anything to her husband. She could even share personal details about her body. Trying to regain his composure, he asked the goddess to stop joking with him. But Cleopatra was interested because the boy continued to resist. She confessed that she would tell him the truth, but she felt that if she did, he wouldn't look for her anymore. Realizing that he thought she wouldn't tell him anyway, just as expected, Cleopatra wanted to know if he really didn't want to marry her. Once again, Sue refused her request, and there was another reason for that too. If he kept talking to himself, he would be seen as a complete lunatic. Cleopatra wanted to see him again and invited the boy to subscribe to her channel. Apparently that had been her primary goal, which was why she tempted him with marriage. At first it was a joke, but Cleopatra confirmed that she really intended to see him again. Sue didn't understand how her channel was involved in this, so the goddess explained that it was the only way for them to see each other. As proof of her sincerity, she told him one more thing. Not all gods had channels on GodTube. Already outside the restaurant, he didn't know what Cleopatra meant by that, also finding the idea of marriage absurd. Incredibly, in the brief conversation he had with her, he had improved his mind by 7%. Soon, the boy refocused on his goal of becoming an S-rank hunter. While walking, he received a message from his sister. Today was her birthday, and she asked him to come home earlier. He had completely forgotten. He was still being pursued by the director, who now knew he had gone somewhere else. His employee wanted to know if there was a specific reason why she wanted to see him in person. She was only doing this because it involved her niece. Imagining that the boy would soon leave, she asked the employee to find a place where they could talk. And since they would only have a conversation, she asked him to try not to seem rude. Then a warning was given. A dungeon would appear in that location. An unexpected dungeon break. This event could put everyone at risk. The warning stated that the dungeon was B rank and citizens should evacuate immediately. She asked him to wait patiently. Blackie was indeed very intelligent, obeying commands. They wanted to introduce him to their parents soon since they were also part of the family. The siblings finally found the urns containing their parents' ashes. Unfortunately, the date of death coincided with his sister's birthday, and it was on that same day that a dungeon break took her life. His sister wanted to ask a question about that day, when they were embraced by their mother during the dungeon explosion. She wanted to know if he remembered her last words, as if there were a secret to be revealed. There was no way he could forget. It was an indelible memory. But hiding the truth from his sister, he claimed he didn't remember. The warning was given. There would be a dungeon break soon. This event originated from a phenomenon where magical power was distorted, causing 2 major occurrences. In the first, the dungeon's monsters were expelled outside, which would be problematic if the dungeon was S-rank. In the second event, the explosion caused damage and people caught in the shockwave eventually perished. Survivors ended up becoming very ill, and in rare cases, some awakened. From the outside, they watched the imminent explosion of the dungeon. The broadcast instructed citizens to seek shelter in the building. The director's group did their best to take cover. Finally, they were inside, safe. Looking outside, she noticed someone trying to escape from the energy. The young man screamed desperately. He was still a little far from the safest shelter. On the way, he lost his strength, unable to remain standing. There was no strength left in his words either. The man was fading. The director watched helplessly, as it was already too late for that man, until a young man sped past her. She immediately recognized him. This was Sue, the one her niece was interested in. Worried for his safety, she ordered him not to go outside as it was already too late. But the young man had already rescued that man. Sue was protecting his body with his own mana. The dungeon's energy continued to surround them. The situation was becoming increasingly dire as it was no longer possible to bring him inside, and the destruction kept spreading. Using the techniques he had learned, he began to shield himself with his fists. Taiji is the process of creation and transformation of things in essence. Understanding this art means knowing how things work in reality. Everything in the universe is subject to change. Related to the duality of existence and emptiness, the dungeon being made of energy is also part of the universe. And since it is made of matter, it must obey the laws of the universe. Inside the hospital, the survivors were impressed that he had managed to condense the explosion's energy. He did it by concentrating magic using Taiji, but it was still impossible to neutralize it completely. The power began to leak, making the situation increasingly dangerous. The boy called for Blackie to help him. A small creature rushed toward the man who needed rescuing. It positioned itself in front of him to protect him from any danger. Now Sue no longer had to worry about the risk of energy leaking. His immediate problem was another. His hand could barely hold on any longer. He couldn't keep out for much longer. He had to accept the inevitable outcome. Remembering his goals, he realized that he needed to become stronger. With his current strength, he wouldn't be able to succeed, not just in preventing destruction, but in saving that man's life. Realizing he was already giving up, he decided to change his mind and be optimistic. He began doing everything possible to change the situation. The survivors didn't know that something like this was even possible. Inside the hospital, his sister appeared completely desperate. She ran to him to see how he was, as the worst had already passed. She didn't understand why he had done something so reckless, only wishing that he wouldn't die. Sue asked if she still remembered their mother's last words. But Sue remained deeply worried, fearing that something dangerous had happened to her brother. Finally, he told her what their mother had said. Their mother had told them not to worry, that she was fine. Since it was her daughter's birthday, she only wished for good things to happen to her in the future. She wanted them not to remember that day as the day of her death, because it was a very special day, the day her beautiful daughter was born. Thanks to her sacrifice, Anne managed to survive. Despite her condition, she only passed away the next day. Even so, Seo's birthday became the anniversary of their mother's death. At last, he shared with her their mother's final words. That was why he had saved that man, because he heard that today was the day his daughter would have her birthday. He even began lamenting, knowing he wouldn't survive. Recognizing the identical situation, he could only miss his mother. That was why he couldn't ignore him. The boy woke up suddenly, surprising someone who had already expected it. He must have lost consciousness after the battle and began to think that Sharon had probably taken him to the SH Company hospital. However, he soon found himself face to face with someone unfamiliar. This immediately made him wonder what was happening. This was also not the room he was usually in when hospitalized. Based on its structure and size, it seemed like a more restricted area. Before him, the woman introduced herself. She was Hannah Mina, Sharon's aunt, and she had found him there because she wanted to talk to him. But she was intrigued that he hadn't asked what had happened or why she was there. Since it wasn't his first time in a situation like this, he was starting to get a little used to it. The first thing the young man wanted to know was what had happened to his sister. It had been too much of a shock for her. After he lost consciousness, she had fainted. Hearing that, he became extremely worried, wanting to know where his sister was. He was told that she was in the next room and was recovering very well. Knowing that the woman wanted to speak with him, he asked what she wanted to know or if she had something to say. Without hesitation, she said that she completely approved. But he had no idea what exactly she was approving. She had heard that they were meeting regularly, assuming they must have some kind of relationship. Indeed, they were seeing each other because of private fencing lessons, but he still didn't understand why she was making such a big deal out of it. This made him even more suspicious about what exactly she was approving. He imagined that because of the investment the girl was making, there must be people questioning it. So if she approved of this training, it meant she also agreed that it was important and that he was competent enough to continue as a teacher. Even though the woman approved, she couldn't say whether her brothers would agree. For the boy, it was fine. Besides not knowing they were talking about the same thing, he found it reasonable that people would question it. The hardest part would be getting approval from the CEO. So the boy told her that Sharon had already secured that approval. That took the woman by surprise. She hadn't imagined that things were already that far along. Once again, the boy was firm. She had received permission from her own grandfather. Hearing that, the woman became emotional, impressed by her niece's personal growth. It was no longer necessary for her, as an aunt, to interfere in anything. The boy was already finding all this emotion a bit strange. Knowing that he was going to build a house, she stated that she could help him in any way she could. asking if there was anything he needed. Surprised that she already knew about it, she explained that she was deeply involved in the company's construction division. Her niece usually didn't ask for favors, so she was very surprised when she asked for help. The woman wanted to know if all the materials had already been gathered. The boy had been working hard because it was very difficult to obtain everything he needed, spending a lot of time exploring dungeons. She didn't understand why he was still doing that if he wanted to build a house. She was completely shocked to discover that the house would be built using dungeon materials. He still didn't know when construction would begin. It might not even work out, but he at least wanted to try. The woman stated that she would get the materials for him, leaving him speechless. Being called auntie, she said that wasn't bad at all. Now that she had decided she was going to cover all the expenses, the boy didn't know how to react to that since the estimated cost of the materials was around $3 billion. He asked what her motivation was for doing so much. The woman replied that she knew this house would be the home where he would raise many children with her niece. His expression showed that he hadn't understood anything, while the woman realized she had gone too far. Highly motivated, she grabbed a piece of paper to give him her contact information. He was going to give her his business card, but that number was linked to several other companies, so it was better to give her a more direct contact. With that number, he could talk to her directly if he needed anything. He just had to reach out. Completely frozen, he still didn't understand the woman's perception of the whole situation. Now he and his sister were outside the hospital, in what seemed to be a garden. He had been receiving special treatment from many important people and needed to clarify a few misunderstandings. But thanks to them, he and his sister had been well taken care of, and her health had improved significantly. Now he didn't know how to explain everything that had been happening to Siwa. His sister already knew about his life as a hunter. He should at least explain everything that happened during that incident. He just didn't know where to start. Before he could talk to her, he was approached by a stranger. The man observing him seemed very grateful. Knowing that this was the person he had saved, he asked how he was feeling. Thanks to the young man's actions, he was fine, and the hospital had also confirmed that there was nothing wrong with his health. That made Sue very happy, not noticing that a little girl had approached. That girl was the man's daughter, who introduced her to the one who had saved his life. It took the child a moment to understand what was happening, but she was very grateful that he had saved her father's life. She quickly got distracted by the dog that was with them in the garden. Happily, she ran over to Blackie so they could play. The man explained that they had been abandoned by the child's mother shortly after her birth. He couldn't imagine what would have happened if he were no longer alive. Thinking about any scenario like that made him deeply emotional, because that boy hadn't just saved his life, he had saved his daughter's as well. After that brief interaction, they said their goodbyes. The dog looked sad to see them go. Sio said she had a dream about their mother. Usually, she always appeared sorrowful, as if she had something to say to them but wasn't able to. This time, her dream was completely different. She had been able to say thank you. But since it was just a dream, she couldn't make her mother give her any further explanations. The feeling she had was that she might not have dreams like this anymore, but they still hoped they would be able to see her in their dreams eventually. The girl, filled with joy, said that it was okay because she had her brother to take care of her, and along with them, they also had Blackie. Sue looked up while reflecting on everything that had happened. He had the feeling that from now on, everything in his life would change for the better. If he had been a little faster, he could have saved that man without suffering from the explosion's damage. If Hercules had been in his place, he would have certainly blown up the explosion itself. Maybe even S-rank hunters were capable of that. Since he had gotten a free subscription, he started thinking about what he could learn. Since he was unsure, he decided to get in touch with Hercules. He appeared immediately to answer his teacher's call. Seeing him all sweaty, he asked if he had been training, discovering that it was chess day, which was why he hadn't called earlier. Helping with the Sphinx had made him very well regarded to the point that Hercules abandoned his training to speak with him. The god was a little saddened. He had neglected his training, and now he could only push 34 megatons. If that was really his strength, he was powerful beyond measurable scales. Sumo apologized for interrupting him, but Hercules wouldn't leave him waiting. The boy wished he would speak less formally, but Hercules wasn't sure how to do that. Trying to act naturally, he asked what brought Face there. Knowing the problem, he didn't recommend learning a different or artistic movement. Sumo should focus on what Hercules had already taught him because besides footwork, he had also learned how to be creative with his body. If he learned something else of the same type, it would only confuse him. The boy realized that it would be better to learn the specific movement. Hercules emphasized that if his goal was to get faster, there was no problem. The muscles he used to throw a punch weren't limited to just that function. He needed to make all of his muscles cooperate so that energy was channeled from the tips of his feet to his hands. Simply put, he focused on the part that made him faster. It wouldn't interfere with his learning progress, but it would make execution much easier. Now he needed to find something that increased his speed. Hercules said that doing so would allow him to master the art better than the god himself, because he could take the best trait from each god and make it his own. But that wasn't exactly what the boy planned for his life. Now the question was whether there was a god of speed. He couldn't think of anyone in particular. Before subscribing to a channel, he also didn't know what he would learn. Understanding the boy's need, Hercules recommended that he seek out Hermes. Even Hercules wouldn't be able to catch him if Hermes wanted to run away. Hermes was one of the 12 Olympian gods, also known as the god of thieves and the messenger of the gods. Besides speed, there was another trait of his that was quite interesting. Hercules said that he'd already tried to kill Hermes every time he was tricked by him, but he had never managed to catch him. Hermes claimed that he wasn't a liar. He just sometimes forgot to reveal the truth. After saying those words, Zeus struck lightning bolts at him but didn't land a single hit. His speed was definitely no joke. If Hercules said he was that fast, there was nothing else for the boy to worry about. His only concern was that he might end up learning more about fraud than actual speed. But since it was a solid recommendation, he decided to try anyway. If it went wrong, he would hold Hercules accountable. As soon as he subscribed to Hermes' channel, he received the super speed trait, a great relief. The videos on his channel seemed to be prank videos. Not only that, but all the videos were about deception in some way. Maybe he wouldn't be able to improve his speed by watching videos like that. Outside the hospital, he thought that he would only be able to increase his speed if he started practicing, and his body already seemed to be healthier. He was eager to see how fast he could run using his super strength as well, even though his super speed progress was still at 0. He believed he would be able to measure his maximum speed. His foot pushed against the ground with great force. He began to cut through the ground like a blue lightning bolt. That had left him completely exhausted. The burden of his body is not light at all, as it is necessary to use strength to produce speed. Only then did he realize that he was in a completely different place, familiar than with a mountain. He managed to reach Guanaxent, which seemed like a brief step. He is beginning to gain proficiency in his new ability while being scared of it. He doesn't know if his speed will increase with proficiency or if he will gain more precise control over it. One thing is certain for now, he needs to be very cautious. If he had hit a building, he could have caused casualties. The idea would be to practice his speed inside dungeons, which is what he will do as soon as he is discharged from the hospital. Once inside the dungeon, he is already being filmed before the action begins. The terrifying creatures try to scare him. They are B-rank monsters. The cameraman is very frightened because he knows that creatures like these have invaded Earth before. Scared, he watches as several creatures charge toward his boss. It won't be long before they are finally within his reach. The cameraman doesn't believe his boss can dodge the creatures, which are as fast as sound. As if nothing had changed, he began to repel the first creatures. Once they are within his reach, there is only one fate for them. The boy is becoming more determined to defeat the creatures, eliminating all of them and doing everything as quickly as possible. Realizing that his boss is faster than the creatures, the cameraman was truly impressed. Sue moves past them like a blue lightning bolt. In no time, there was no creature left that could oppose them. Sue wondered if the cameraman had managed to film all the action. With that, his proficiency had developed significantly. Now he's able to control his speed even better, suspecting that he can become even faster. By improving his ability, becoming stronger than Hercules himself is starting to seem like a possibility. His cameraman apologized for what happened. Even if they edit the footage, they won't be able to salvage anything from what happened. All that remains are blurs. Now he needs to adjust his speed so that it looks good on camera. It will also be good for him to train his partner. Yujun is a hunter with an A-class trait, and it's possible he will get used to this speed. He learned from Hercules that when the body is sick, it's the head that suffers, and he will make sure to teach this to the young man as well. They need to start somewhere. On his phone, he found out that all the materials had already been gathered. Finally, the time had come for him to build his new house. He doesn't remember giving his contact information to that woman, thinking that perhaps Charon did it. Since it was a direct request from the director, they managed to gather everything quickly, as it was already in the warehouse. The company has some things available for immediate delivery in case he needs these materials. Jaejin is the president of the construction division and learned that the boy is going to build a house using only materials from the dungeon. That is his plan for now. The man stated that this would make the house more durable. But durability is not the only important factor. Casually, the boy stated that if it doesn't work out, he will change it. To the man's despair, who thinks the boy has no idea how much those materials cost. Gathering all of that was so difficult, he was proud to have done it. But he was irritated at the thought that the boy had no experience in construction. Thinking about the director, she's very interested and made a point of learning a lot, not being afraid to go into the field. By asking questions, he discovered that this was the boy's first time building a house. But he learned that he had already made his own equipment. Forging and architecture are not similar at all. This made Jaejin so frustrated that he wished he could curse the boy out loud. He has no idea how Sue managed to get close to the director, but judging by the way she requested this, maybe she wants him there to teach the boy in some way. So he asked if the boy had the blueprint for his project. He has everything in his head, so the engineer started asking more questions about the type of soil where the construction would take place. He cannot be careless with architecture. Knowing the type of soil is fundamental, besides choosing a place that in the end is comfortable and suits the purpose of the space. The design process is also very important given its direct impact on the resident's psyche. By combining all this with technology and engineering, it is possible to turn the impossible into a real construction. Architecture is the sum of everything humanity has developed. Soon began to realize that things are really very complex. Once again, the engineer asked about the blueprints. Receiving the paper from the boy's hands, he took a good look at it. He expected to find scribbles with the traits of an amateur, but he was impressed. It was much more complex than he had imagined. He's been in this line of work for decades and had never seen anything as perfect as that, as if it had been written by a god. He thought the boy was a hunter, but then he learned that he also works with the internet. He tried to reassure himself, saying that they were just sketches, translating the boy's thoughts. It was necessary to translate thought into reality, so he ordered that they go to the construction site immediately. Sue began to work, saying that he was going to break the object. A single strike was more than enough. He returned to the engineer, dusting off his clothes. The man did not expect the house to be completely destroyed just by the boy's fists. Equally impressed by his ability to lift weight, he was left speechless. Sue remembered Hephaestus's advice. He should dig the ground first. That made him gather energy into one of his feet, stomping the ground firmly. The engineer didn't know who had told him to dig the ground, because that person forgot to say that he wasn't supposed to destroy it. He'd always known that hunters had superhuman strength. He just didn't expect it to be this exaggerated. The digging phase was already complete. Sue started rushing to move on to the next steps, while the engineer figured it was probably time for him to leave. Yijun suddenly appeared, ready to help his boss. In the middle of the site, he began carrying some heavy objects as instructed. After exerting force, he realized that the object hadn't even moved. Taking it as a personal challenge, he began using even more strength. The only result he achieved was knocking over the remaining pillars, causing them to collapse on top of him. Sue rushed to his aid, asking what had just happened. He should be stronger, considering he's a B-rank hunter. With that said, Sue asked if he was okay. Maybe the weight was too much. Yijun's right side had been crushed, but knowing he had regenerative abilities, Sue told him to stop stalling. Even though he could regenerate, he still felt all the pain from the incident and asked to be taken to the hospital. He was scared because he didn't want to regenerate while his bones were misaligned. Understanding the situation, Sue used a needle to assist his employee. That way he could regenerate without difficulty. Yijun wanted to know how he had done that. The misaligned body blocks its own energy. Sue simply corrected the flow. Now he returned to building the house, telling his employee to step aside and rest. Looking at the young man, who still seemed interested, he asked if he would be okay with having his arms broken a few times. He said he would take care of him, but that they should break them a few times. Now that things had reached this point, it would only make him stronger, and they couldn't miss an opportunity like this. With a sadistic smile, Sue said he was doing all of this for the boy's own good. He imagined it would take at least 2 weeks, but he ended up finishing the job in just 3 days. That brought him great satisfaction. His assistant, on the other hand, was completely drained, even though his arm was still injured. There might be a way to make him feel less pain. Using his skills with needles, he began treating his assistant. Yijun didn't think he was helping in any way, but Sue encouraged him, saying that not only was he helping, but he was also making personal progress. At first he wasn't able to lift a single beam, but now he could carry 2 at once. The young man felt that he was getting stronger. Even though his learning was slow, he was progressing at his own pace. Although he was learning differently from Charon, he was gradually absorbing the principles of Teiji. This wasn't a technique that could be learned just by having A-rank abilities. It should have been impossible for Yijun to learn anything. But thanks to his regenerative ability, Sue was able to channel a bit of power into him every time he treated him. The boy was able to advance slightly within his own rank without suffering. Maybe he wasn't even aware of his own progress, and thanks to this opportunity, Sue also gained proficiency in his medical skills. He is getting closer and closer to being able to treat his sister effectively. Maybe he should give his sister some medicine. But he had to interrupt his thought to help his employee who had gotten hurt once again. After finishing helping, he told the young man to get some rest because now he was going to finish building the house. Hephaestus said that he had built a very cozy home. Yijun, who had participated in the construction, was impressed with the finished result. And for completing the house, his proficiency in metallurgy had increased dramatically. If he keeps building houses, he might progress even faster. But the production process is so labor-intensive and depends on so many materials that he thought about doing it differently. Yijun thinks his boss should throw a housewarming party in his new home. The idea was very good, and he had received help from many different people, praising his employee for giving a great suggestion. Thinking to himself, since there were still things to arrange, he might hold the party in 3 days. Yijun bid him farewell, stating that he would see him again in those 3 days, making sure to bring his sister along. Sue wanted to buy a meal for the boy, but he was desperate to escape from there. Finding the scene funny, he lamented because it was never his intention to make the boy work too much. Now he needed to think about who to invite to this party. It's not as if they would simply show up just because they were invited. The engineer went to the director to share what had happened. Even he had difficulty explaining what he had seen, because the house had already been completely built, to the director's surprise. Moreover, Sue did not need any external help. He did everything alone. The director found it hard to believe that construction had only started 3 days ago. The engineer said that the boy lifted things with his own hands. He flew through the sky and crushed the ground as if it were tofu. Even the director thought that sounded too far-fetched. Concluding his story, he admitted that he didn't understand anything he had seen. That filled the director with curiosity because she wished she had seen it too. Finally, he showed the house to his sister, who was very surprised. She couldn't believe that such a wonderful and well-built place would be her new home. Their living room was now very spacious and the house was full of rooms. It didn't even feel like their home anymore. Sue was very happy that she was delighted with the house. The girl already knew there would be a housewarming party to celebrate, and some people had already been invited. Knowing this, she called her brother to go buy some ingredients so they could prepare meals. He knew that Sue was an excellent cook, but he was worried that she might overwork herself in her current condition. The girl assured him that it wouldn't be too exhausting. Seeing her joy, he decided they would cook. Maybe it was the hospital treatment, but his sister definitely seemed a little better. So the small family headed to the nearest market. Far away from them, there were some envious people who couldn't stop thinking about him. Because Sue was responsible for ruining all their plans, including the mass production of weapons and the forced awakening of people. Juwon wanted to know where his enemy was at that moment. Knowing that he had already been located, he asked to be taken to him. The underling was surprised to realize that his boss wanted to go personally. If he made such a move, the head of the inspectors might find out. It was a very risky action. Full of envy in his heart, he couldn't wait to embarrass Sue in front of many people. One of his subordinates asked to be in charge of the task. Joe Buckshin believed he could handle everything in a more discreet manner. But the envious man had no patience for another mistake, which was why he was going to take care of things himself. The underling decided not to interfere. And making a casual comment, he claimed there was a problem at the school. The inspector's hunting dogs have an excellent sense of smell. Not understanding the joke, the envious man stated that he would not tolerate it again. Then the underling said that the school had made some reckless moves and ended up attracting Seonji's attention. The school tried to block him, but things became difficult once he took the lead. In the current situation, only the greatest envious man could stop this person. If it was related to the school, the Red Shadow must also be watching everything. He warned that Jigwang had already lost in combat. He wanted to know if his servant would be capable, but the subordinate was offended by being compared to that of the trash, assuring that he should be given this mission. Siddle was very impressed with what his sister had prepared. He just doesn't know why she made so much food, but she did everything with her guests in mind. Besides, it's better to have some leftovers than to run out of food. Even the small manifested creatures eager to eat. Despite being small, it has a voracious appetite, and it would be risky to let it eat anything. He decided to give the small creature a different kind of food. Seo wants to know when the guests will start arriving. He informed everyone that it would be a dinner, so they should be arriving soon. His phone alerts him that unauthorized individuals are approaching the perimeter. That was the signal he needed. His guests were arriving. The siblings were the first to arrive at his house. Soon doesn't understand why they brought so many things, but they couldn't show up without a gift for the hosts. The girl is truly impressed that everything was built by Sue's hands. Jun thought they would be late since his sister was quite anxious. He said that the girl couldn't decide what to wear, but she quickly interrupted his speech. She apologized for what her brother had done, saying he must have been out of his mind. The siblings continued to bicker while Sue watched awkwardly. Seo approached them to introduce herself as the sister of the house owner. The girl was surprised to learn that this was Sue's sister. She was about to introduce herself, but was immediately interrupted by her own brother. The young man was completely enchanted, declaring that he was the one who helped Sue the most. Soa noticed that there was a small creature inside the house. Thinking it was a very cute little pet, she started chasing after it. But the creature ran away, the same reaction it had when it first met Sua. Sovan said that Palwine wouldn't be able to attend, assuming he must be too busy with the seminar. Stomuv had already received a message from him about that, so he was aware. The event was called a seminar, but in reality it was a competition among the best blacksmiths, where the top performer would receive a grand prize. Suwu started getting interested in it. Palwine wanted to showcase the skills he had learned from Suwu. The prize changes from time to time, but this time, it would be awarded by none other than Master Aurelian himself. Now the man's enthusiasm for participating in the competition made sense. The system alerted him that another unauthorized presence was approaching, so Suwu went to the door to see who it was. Zhao Naoyan had just arrived, surprised to find that she was already being awaited at the door. Suwu said he was coincidentally on his way to the door and asked where her mother was, having heard that the woman was very busy with work. It would have been great if all of them had come. Once inside the house, the women greeted each other. It had been a long time since the two of them had the chance to talk so casually. Soen wanted to know if he had invited everyone on the same day, and that was exactly what he had done. He had never celebrated anything like this before. Soen said it wasn't a problem, but wasn't sure how to explain the situation. Unfortunately, his attention shifted to yet another guest who was arriving. Far from there, several bodies lay scattered on the ground, the work of pandemonium. Inspector Hunter Taman was outraged by what he saw. The entire village had been massacred. Dongwin confirmed that the entire area had already been investigated. Unfortunately, there were no survivors, but they had found something. All the bodies in that place were men. He then asked where the chief inspector was and was informed that he was pursuing Juwon. But to their surprise, the chief inspector was already at the scene. As soon as he approached, they asked if he had found Juwon, but he had managed to escape. He was stronger than expected. For a brief moment, the chief inspector lost his balance. He was immediately supported by his subordinates, apologizing, saying he just felt a little dizzy. Only then did the young man realize that this was a weak excuse. The chief inspector's condition was far worse than he was letting on, but he wanted to keep it hidden. It would be terrible if the citizens knew he had lost to a criminal. That's why he insisted that there was nothing wrong with him. On the other side of the forest, the leader of the Babak clan had also taken a severe beating. He wanted to know what had happened to the school. Because of their intervention, the ceremony had continued as planned, and thanks to their actions, the chief inspector had not suspected that something was being celebrated. This was the first time he had fought against Seonjae, and the rumors about the inspector's abilities were far below reality. But it was great that he had discovered everything at the cost of his left eye. Back at Suwoo's house, he continued receiving guests. The person in charge of editing his videos had arrived, bringing along her little siblings. That made him very happy because he loves children. Once inside, the little ones were amazed by how cool the house was. They even thought that maybe one day they could live in a house like that. The little girl thought it must be very expensive, estimating it could cost at least 1 million. A huge number for the young boy's mind, who couldn't even calculate what could be done with that amount of money. This made him genuinely impressed by how rich that young man must be. The older sister apologized for the children, saying they were still too young and made embarrassing assumptions. It seemed that all the guests had arrived, except for those who had said they wouldn't be able to come. With everyone gathered, it was time to eat. He had also invited one more person out of pure politeness, though they might not come. Since he had just finished building the house, there was still a lot of furniture missing, so he just gathered some tables and chairs so they could eat. Before the meal, he received a notification on his phone. Unauthorized people were still approaching his residence. This time he felt a little worried. Bakshin had not expected his target to be receiving guests at home that day. He had learned that they were just acquaintances and didn't know each other's true identities. This could be an interesting opportunity. His target had no idea what was happening, but it was also a double-edged sword. If they didn't know who they were dealing with, it could be very risky. Ignoring all the variables, he decided he would eliminate them all. He ordered all his subordinates to be ready to act. Everyone had already arrived, so that notification left him somewhat uneasy. Even so, they sat at the table to eat, their expressions showing a certain apprehension. They exchanged glances, unsure of what to do. Seo signaled to her brother that he should do something. Not knowing what to do, he assumed they should introduce themselves, so he decided to start. The siblings took the opportunity to introduce themselves together. Jung said she was the daughter of the owner of their old house. Soen and her brother did the same. He was currently working for Suwoo. Vyaka said that she was the editor of his video channel, and those two little children were her siblings. Minjun also introduced herself. She was currently an investigator. Sharon did the same, saying she was a hunter representing the Esh Guild. For these two, Ian only sent invitations out of courtesy, never expecting them to actually show up. Once the introductions were complete, it was finally time to eat. The children were very excited to try all the delicious food. Suwoo said it was fine. They should eat as much as they could, as there was plenty of food. They began eating and complimenting Siwa's cooking. With everyone satisfied, they suggested that it was time to give him the gifts they had brought for the occasion. As a special gift, the siblings had brought ogre tendons. It was a great decision as he needed them. He had been thinking about crafting new equipment for himself. However, he considered the gift too expensive. Each unit must be extremely costly. The girl confirmed that they were valuable, but they weren't just a gift for his housewarming. It was also a way to express their gratitude for Suwoo saving Yijun. The other woman said her gifts were simpler, materials for him to study for the special qualification exam. She even offered to help Seo out with her studies, which made the girl very grateful. And since his cameras kept breaking, his editor gave him a brand new camera. It seems she noticed everything he mentioned on camera, but she also knew that the girl wasn't in the best financial situation. Because of her kindness, he was very grateful, promising to use the camera for his new videos. He told the cameraman that he absolutely couldn't break this new camera. Yijun swore he would protect it with his life. This was the first time the inspector had attended an event like this. She hadn't known she was supposed to bring a gift. Sue reassured her that it was no problem. He was already grateful enough that she had come. But his comment couldn't lift her mood, which had visibly dropped. Meanwhile, the other woman thought that for events like this, she should have brought a different type of gift. She had prepared something useful for the house. Then she showed on her phone what she had purchased for him. The red-haired girl was shocked to learn that it was a carafe sofa. Those gifts were extremely luxurious. He also received a wardrobe, each one costing billions. Sumu couldn't believe that such expensive items existed. The girl continued, explaining that they were very difficult to obtain. There are only 10 sofas like that in existence and fewer than 1,000 units of a wardrobe, sold exclusively to important people. The girl has access to these kinds of items due to the privileges provided by her aunt, who personally selected the gifts. Looking at the gifts once again, the red-haired girl recommended that he choose the sofa. That was when her student responded that all of them were gifts for him. That comment left everyone in the room speechless. The inspector noticed that something more was going on. Meanwhile, Sue hadn't expected to receive all of that at once. He began to look over all the items that had been purchased. Now he could fully furnish his house with all sorts of appliances and electronics. The girl wasn't even aware of how extremely wealthy she was, surprised by the reaction of the people around her. Somewhere else, someone realized that this was exactly what should be expected from someone in her family. This world had truly become a different place, until a sudden thought struck his mind. This could all be a dowry before marriage, thanks to the misunderstanding between them, and it seemed like that narrative was gaining more and more traction. Back at the house, he acknowledged that she was making an effort to keep believing in it. His phone alerted him that unknown people were approaching. Sue thought it might be the guests who had initially said they wouldn't come, until he noticed that the house had entered emergency mode, detecting unauthorized magic usage. These messages filled his heart with worry. Right before his eyes, a massive explosion occurred. So the video ends here. If you don't want to miss the next part, activate the notification bell, and see you next time on Tob's channel.